Good evening, everybody. Mormonism Live, Wednesday, 6 p.m. Here we are live. RFM, how are you doing?
Or a reasonable facsimile thereof in my case.
Okay,
Great,
well,
thank you.
there's that. That sounded like a Book of Abraham reference with the word facsimile, but
Oh, yeah, reasonable.
okay.
That was the part that's not like the Book of Abraham, but
Yeah, well, tonight, folks, we're going to talk about the Word of Wisdom, Section 89 of the D&C. I think originally D&C Section 81, if I'm not mistaken.
I was trying to, read those Roman numerals in the 1835 edition of the Doctrine and Covenants that you made a slide of.
Yeah, and we'll get to that here shortly. But tonight I thought we would go through the history of the Word of Wisdom, talk about the story we were given, the revelation itself, what science says about what these substances are, good or bad for us, and go through some of the moments where the church and its leadership decided to interact with the public at large, or sometimes answers to a member's question, and clarify things. And one of the things I learned from preparing for this, and they're in part things I knew already, but when you put it all together, I don't think the brethren understand what the Word of Wisdom is, because they've been back and forth numerous times about what hot drinks is or whether caffeine is the problem. And so tonight it'll be a lot of fun to dive into that. Any thoughts from you before we start?
By the time we're done with this, it's going to be apparent that either God doesn't know what the Word of Wisdom is and keeps changing his mind, or the brethren may be not in such close connection with God all the time.
Right. It's going to be one or the other, and I don't think you're going to be left with many choices beyond those two. So without further ado, no pun intended, to the Book of Mormon. Let me put the slideshow up. I'll add our names back in there at the bottom. And what we end up with here, here's the thumbnail. I think most of the major things there are included in that. But I thought tonight we would start with the narrative we were given. And I used some images from various, the children's reader having to do with the Doctrine and Covenants, and other places where it's sort of animated for the kids. But this is the story that you and I got, and you and I both know this story by heart. But it's essentially that Joseph Smith is teaching in Kirtland. The brethren are there, and they're all using chewing tobacco. They're smoking pipes. They're spitting their tobacco, missing the spittoon and hitting the floor. Emma, of course, gets frustrated having to clean up after these men. She then speaks to Joseph. They make it sound like it's a private conversation. She's talking to Joseph either after the meeting or aside from all the brethren. And then he ends up going to the Lord in prayer, ask God what should be done about this. And he comes back to the brethren and tells them that the Lord has given the Word of Wisdom, which again, I think is originally Section 81. And this happens in the Newell K. Whitney store. It's in the upper room of the Newell K. Whitney store. I've been there several times, heard the missionaries tell that story about some of the revelations received there, including section now in the modern D&C, Section 89. Am I missing anything in terms of the original story?
No, but did that ever bother you at all?
In what way?
Why does a revelation depend upon Emma complaining about something?
Well, very much the case, right? Like,
men. I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean that her feelings shouldn't be taken into consideration. But if you're the God of the universe, you need to be reminded that maybe a health code would be a good thing if that's something you already had planned.
Yeah. And I'll note, too, that lots of religions have health codes, but this one may not be as much revelation as the believers in the church think, and we'll get into that. But yes, this did require Emma to complain to Joseph about the mess, and Joseph asking God, hey, God, Emma thinks this is messy and unlike brethren representing God. What should I do about this? And then the section comes. So.
And why is Joseph Smith's first go to God instead of, hey, guys, would you mind knocking off with the chewing and the spitting because my wife is giving me a hard time? You could just tell him, hey, knock it off, okay? When we're in here, we're not doing that. It's making a mess. But no, it has to be a federal case. God has to get involved.
Every moment like this is a unique opportunity, RFM, to invoke God and to then have the brethren think that man must be a prophet.
God to Joseph Smith is like my bodyguard.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so I wanted to jump in next on what the scripture itself says. So I'm going to put up the Doctrine and Covenants. I think this is one of the 1844, so this is the early edition. And what we end up with here is section LXXXL, or XXI, I'm sorry, LXXI, 3 X's. I'm making a mistake there. LXXXI, which I believe is section 81.
Mhm.
And we can read this whole thing, but I wondered if you would read the heading first. And I want to say something here, which is in the issue about, I gotta, no, I'm gonna switch it over here to this one. You can
Oh,
put us.
thank you. Okay, thank you.
So I want to note something, which is when we get to, I think it's, is it section 20 where they get the birth of Christ being on April 6th?
Yes.
Yeah. And there's a scripture in there that really was just John Whitmer, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's who it was. John Whitmer putting in a heading, and he had done it in multiple sections of the D&C, where he's basically telling the date in a very formal way, 1830 years after the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. And leaders then interpreted that later on as being part of the revelation, and hence declaring that Jesus Christ was telling the church that this is my birthday. I was born on this day. We'll get to this later, but I just want to note, in this instance, it actually works in the opposite. And I won't say any more than that, but I'll let you read this, and we'll come back to it later, and I'll remind folks that we mentioned this earlier on. But will you read the chapter heading in the original Revelation, and then we'll read the verses and talk about what science says?
Yes, absolutely. A word of wisdom for the benefit of the council of high priests. Notice is very direct into whom it's delivered. Assembled in Kirtland and church, and also the saints in Zion, so it goes beyond them, I guess. To be sent greeting, not by commandment or constraint, but by revelation and the word of wisdom, showing forth the order and will of God in the temporal, the physical salvation of all saints in the last days, given for a principle with promise, adapted to the capacity of the weak, and the weakest of all saints who are or can be called saints. Oh, I'm sorry, Bill.
Oh, sorry. In the original Doctrine and Covenants, section 81, which later becomes section 89, there's actually only 3 verses to this section. Now, later on, they'll be split up into like 21 verses. But in the original, it's all compiled, kind of crammed into 3. None of the words are changed per se, at least not that I noticed. But again, it's just they're just minimizing the number of verses used, and so there's a lot more substance in each verse rather than kind of splitting it up into smaller amounts. But in this first verse, it says, "Behold, verily thus saith the Lord unto you, in consequence of evils and designs." And I don't know what that word is there. WH something H.
Where on earth? Hang on a second here, because I'll look at it on what's on the computer right now. Is that okay?
Yeah, please do. But behold, verily thus saith the Lord unto you, in consequence of evil designs.
Evils and designs is what it is in the current edition.
Yeah, evils and designs. And what's the next word after that?
Oh, yeah, evils and designs which do and will exist.
Okay. So the ink blot there is which do and will exist in the hearts of conspiring men in the last days. By the way, this reminds me of the 116 lost pages, sort of the way he's talking about the evil conspiring people in the background. I have warned you and forewarn you by giving unto you this word of wisdom by revelation. And inasmuch as any man drinketh wine or strong drink among you, behold, it is not good. Neither meat in the sight of your Father, only in assembling yourselves together to offer up your sacraments before him. And behold,
so wine is okay for the sacrament. This is specifically approved here, I think.
Correct. In a particular instance, yes. And behold, this should be wine, yea, pure wine of the grape of the vine of your own make. And I'll just stop here for one moment. One of the things that I was told a lot in my time in the church, especially early on, when they're going over the word of wisdom, especially for newer members, is this conversation about how and again, the conspiring men in the last days also sort of adds to this, but that there were people out there who were trying to poison the sacrament wine of the saints. And so it was always important that they make their own and bring it, so that way there would be no room for it to be in the hands of other people and it to be tampered with. Did you get that story as well?
Yes, and I think that is more elaborated upon. Is it section 27 that talks about waters allowable for the sacrament? And then they talk some more about the idea maybe poison would be involved. Joseph Smith had, or at least presented as having, a major league persecution complex, which he gave to the saints, and which they are proud holders of to this day.
Yeah. And I'm not an advocate for this theory. I'll just note this here. Bryce Blankenagel, and I forget the other gentleman, but they've presented at Sunstone and other places, podcasts and elsewhere, suggesting that maybe psychedelics of some sort were utilized by Joseph Smith in order to have the saints have spiritual experiences under the influence of drugs rather than an actual literal spiritual experience. Because of revelation or because God's working with them. I will note, making it so that the wine is homemade rather than being purchased in a public store would actually give the leaders of the church, Joseph Smith specifically, actually more access, I think, to be able to put some kind of substance into the wine. So while it would prevent maybe outsiders from poisoning it,
Yes.
it might give greater access to insiders to do something with it. Again, not an advocate of that, but I will at least note that.
Like Emma?
Uh,
That's who Joseph really needed to worry about poisoning him, was Emma, not some people, evil designing men outside the church.
yeah, there are some anecdotal evidence that she tried to do that a time or two. Okay, so after that it says, and again, strong drinks are not for the belly, but for the washing of your bodies. And again, tobacco is not for the body, neither for the belly, and is not good for man, but is an herb for bruises and all sick cattle, to be used with judgment and skill. And again, hot drinks are not for the body or belly. So there's the original verse 1. And I'll just note here on the side, alcohol can cause 7 types of cancer. This is stuff that is relayed to us from science. We clearly all understand that alcohol is not good for us. I remember seeing something last year, they talked about some types of heart disease actually you might benefit at preventing those by having a certain amount of alcohol a day or a week. But recent research in the last year or 2, 3 has come out suggesting that no amount of alcohol is healthy, that alcohol is one of the contributors to cancer. And so in this regard, not that Joseph Smith was delivering something completely new, but will at least acknowledge that prohibiting alcohol is beneficial to the saints if we go along with what science says. And we all understand tobacco is the same. It's not good for us. Anything you want to say there about those?
Does that include wine?
Yeah. Again, there was a suggestion years ago that a glass of wine with dinner would have benefits for heart conditions or preventing certain kinds of heart disease. But in the last few years, the studies that have come back have said that no amount of alcohol is healthy. It might be beneficial to that heart disease, but that it actually is more negative than beneficial because it leads to cancer. So no.
You know what my dad used to say when these kinds of studies would pop up?
Yeah, wait a few years and something else will happen.
He would say that too, but he'd also say, well, nobody's getting out of this life alive.
Oh, and you might as well enjoy it, right? You might as well have a little fun.
Yes, that's my motto.
Yeah, so we'll just note in terms of tobacco, in terms of alcohol, the word of wisdom is great advice. And then I'll just note here too, moderate coffee intake actually disagrees with the word of wisdom. It's linked to lower risk of heart disease associated with reduced risk of type 2 diabetes. Strong correlation. I've got some articles at the end of our episode that'll show this, but strong correlation with lower risk of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's.
You are my knight in shining armor.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's what I do every time I hear Parkinson's.
I got you. Tied to lower overall mortality, people who drink it tend to live slightly longer. By the way, I'll note, and I'll show it at the end again as well, but when it comes to like Parkinson's, it requires caffeinated coffee. Decaffeinated coffee has no benefit in that area. It must be caffeinated coffee. And so coffee isn't just caffeine. It's loaded with antioxidants. It contains compounds that improve insulin sensitivity, and it may reduce inflammation. Now, there are some downsides. Coffee can increase anxiety. People have, not knowing, drank way too much coffee and had a health event with a heart attack or something of that sort. If somebody's trying coffee for the first time, generally 1 cup is enough to sort of get your heart racing. And if somebody were to drink 3, 4, 5 cups in the very beginning of sort of building an acclimation to it, you could run the risk of having some issues health-wise. So I'll just note that. If you do have a lot of caffeine in your system, it could disrupt sleep, raise heart rate or blood pressure, and again, be habit forming, but it's one habit that I quite enjoy. So I'm happy to have that addiction. All right, so there's that. And then I'll just note tea, improved heart health, lower stroke risk, possible cancer protective effects, less consistent, but there is some promising data that's come out, better cognitive function over time. And tea contains, I don't know this, but it's L-theanine, I think is how you pronounce that, which promotes calm focus, lower caffeine, less jittery than coffee, rich in polyphenols, powerful plant compounds that are also beneficial. So there's that. Will you read verse 2 here?
Yes. And again, verily, I, God speaking, say unto you, not Joseph Smith, by the way, this is God. All wholesome herbs God hath ordained for the constitution, nature, and use of man, every herb in the season thereof, and every fruit in the season thereof. All these to be used with prudence and thanksgiving. Yea, flesh also of beasts, of the fowls, and of the fowls of the air, I, the Lord, hath ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly, and it is pleasing unto me that they should not be used only in times of winter or of cold or famine. Did you want to say anything before we go on from there?
No, you can keep going.
Okay. Because it starts to sound like he's suggesting practical vegetarianism here, unless you have to, and he's going to double down on that in this next passage. All grain is ordained for the use of man and of beasts to be the staff of life, not only for man, but for the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven, and all wild animals that run or creep on the earth. And these hath God made for the use of man only in times of famine and excess of hunger. So only if you're starving to death should you be eating meat.
Yeah, and this is interesting in that if Mormons were creating the food pyramid, at the very top of the food pyramid would be grains. It is obvious from section 81, here again, future 89, that grains are the most recommended thing by Heavenly Father, and then it works down from there about other things you should eat meat sparingly, and even talks about how like the fowls of the air should be less so and meat should be less so, but grains should be number one. And I'll just note that what modern nutrition actually agrees on is that most credible research lands in the same place, that vegetables and fruits consistently the most protective for health, lean proteins, fish, legumes, some meats, important for muscle metabolism, healthy fats, olive oil, nuts, seeds, critical for brain and hormone function, whole grains, helpful but not essential.
So I'm not seeing steak in there. Is steak anywhere in there? Can we find steak somewhere in that list, please?
No, a sirloin is not in there, not in the list, doesn't make it.
Can we make that at least a healthy fat or a lean protein?
I will say protein is a big deal. And one of the things that our society has switched on in the last, let's say decade or so, is that we used to think, and you'll see this in our later slides, but the old time view was that carbs were really important. And that proteins like meat were had mixed results. Some of that was harmful for you. And in the last decade, I'll just note that there are lots of negatives, and I'll read that here in just a second. There are lots of negatives attributed to carbs. And again, when we talk carbs, we're talking about the grains, but being used in refined grains, which is mostly what we have access to today because so few people are cooking from scratch and using unprocessed ingredients. But when it comes here to whole grains versus refined grains, whether it's oats or brown rice, quinoa, whole wheat, these have fiber, nutrients, slower digestion. But again, most people eat refined grains, white bread, pasta, pastries, processed cereals. The data on these now is pretty clear. These spike your blood sugar. they are easy to overeat, and they are strongly linked to metabolic issues.
Mm.
So when someone says grains are healthy, certain grains in certain forms in moderation, and I note that because by today's standard, grains would not be at the top of the food pyramid. Meanwhile, Section 81 of the D&C, again, Future 89, does put them at the very top. So there's that.
As long as that bad list does not include strawberry Pop-Tarts, I'll agree.
I love a good strawberry or cherry Pop-Tart. I've got boxes of both in my cabinet. So I love that. And then I'll note here, verse 3, all grain is good for the food of man, as also the fruit of the vine, that which yieldeth fruit, whether in the ground or above the ground. Nevertheless, wheat for man and corn for the ox, oats for the horse, rye for the fowls and for the swine, and for all beast of the field, and barley for all useful animals, not those unuseful ones, and for mild drinks, as also other grain.
Can I ask you a question, Bill?
Yes, please.
Because I've always had this question. I don't understand what God is saying. It's not the first time. But when he starts off by saying, all grain is good for the food of man, okay? But then he says, nevertheless, wheat for man and corn for the ox and oats for the horse, like he's assigning different grains to different species, and man only gets wheat. I don't understand. Why go into this itemization of which grain is good for which species, especially including man, when he's already said that all grain is good for the food of man?
Yeah, well, you'd have to ask Joseph Smith what he means, but my hunch is that he's saying all grain is good for man, but some grain is better than others. And so wheat is the best for man, and each animal has a specific grain assigned to them from Heavenly Father so that each animal will stay in its own sphere of influence, maybe, and just eat the grain it's supposed to.
My favorite part of the word of the wisdom, though I was a late comer to understanding this, is the last part of what you just read, where he says, and barley for all useful animals and for mild drinks.
Yeah,
he's grain. Yeah,
he's telling you that beer is pretty okay.
Beer's fine. Beer is totally in accordance with the word of wisdom. I'm not kidding here.
Yeah.
This actually says beer's okay. Wine, no, but you can use it in a sacrament. All right. And strong drink, no. But beer, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, and all saints who remember to keep and do these sayings, walking in obedience to the commandments, shall receive health in their navel and marrow to their bones. I've heard that in a place or two.
Yes, that got recycled.
It did. And marrow to their bones, and shall find wisdom and great treasures of knowledge from the treasure seeker himself. We shall receive great treasures of knowledge, even hidden treasures.
Just by eating the right thing. Who knew?
And shall run and not be weary, and shall walk and not faint in the Lord. And I, the Lord, give unto them a promise that the destroying angel shall pass by them, as the children of Israel not slay them. Amen. As you noted, strong drinks is whiskey, liquor, vodka. Wine is put into that list. But in Mormon God's lingo, beer is a mild drink and is perfectly okay in the original commandment as it was given. I will note, and this is the thing when we were believers, we always pointed to, we knew the word of wisdom didn't make sense. Coffee and tea, for instance. And as a believing member, I also knew that there was science from the secular world that said that those things were good for me. And as a believer, I wanted to figure out, like, what do I say to people when they say like coffee or tea? I myself, when I was praying about the Book of Mormon, my big issue was like, sweet tea, really? That's a problem? And one of the things that was always pointed out to me, and I recycled and then used it whenever I would talk to others, is that Mormons live longer. So whether the law makes sense or not, if we do it, the promise is kept by God that we shall run and not be weary, walk and not faint. And there is a study, Deseret News is pointing to it here. UCLA study proves that Mormons live longer. I don't know if this study says as much, but what I used to tell people was that the research showed that Mormons live on average 7 years longer. Any thoughts from you on that?
No, but reading this with new eyes, I'm sitting here thinking, if you're going to run and run and run, I'll bet there's some point where you've run far enough that you're going to be freaking weary no matter how obedient you are to this word of wisdom.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of high priests over the course of my life, and the physical form of those high priests, I don't think lend to a lot of running.
Processed.
Yeah, so there's that. But I will note again, I will give credit to the health code that Mormons live. It does seem to add to a longer life, a more boring one for sure, but
Yes.
a longer life nonetheless. All right, there's that. So now I want to go to what was science saying in 1833 when this revelation was given? Because you and I very well know, but what we're trying to convey to the audience tonight, at least in this segment, is this idea that the way it's taught to us is that, again, the men are using the tobacco, they're spitting on the floor, they're smoking the pipes. And Joseph goes and asks the Lord, and he gets a revelation from God that is imparting new information into the world. And so Joseph is essentially pulling this out of a hat, no pun intended. And we, as believers, are never given the context of what else is going on in the 1830s or before that might give context to why Joseph chose these substances and chose to articulate this code of health in this way. But it becomes really clear that there is a lot of this going on in Joseph Smith's milieu. And so, is there anything you want to say about that before we jump into these? Oh,
I will mention that the word of wisdom, we call it the word of wisdom, and it goes to the word of wisdom, a word of wisdom. That's one of the spiritual gifts that Paul gives us in 1 Corinthians. It's either 12 or 14. I can't remember which. I always get those two confused, but it's probably 12. All the list of the spiritual gifts, there's a word of wisdom. So a word of wisdom simply means a communication from God that is presumably wise. And this falls under that category. So this was given as a word of wisdom to the high council. But we've called it the word of wisdom. And so, well, we may as well, because there's not like there's any other words of wisdom coming down.
yeah. The first one I've got here is means or preserving health and preventing diseases.
I think that's probably of.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, means of. And this was written by Shadrach Ricketson. And this was a physician in New York. And again, we'll see that this is not an isolated publication, that this is going on across multiple facets of Joseph Smith's society. But so I've showed the cover, I've showed the page that this comes from, but will you read the three quotes that are underlined in red, which I made bigger on the far right?
Absolutely, I will. I can't quite read the date of publication. Is that 1806?
1806.
Oh, so this is definitely well in advance of 1833 in the Word of Wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay, so from this book, tea will induce a total change of constitution in the people of this country. Indeed, it has gone a great way towards effecting that evil already. This guy's really down on tea. He hates tea.
He is.
Avoid likewise the excessive use of hot drinks. Hey, that sounds familiar. Hot drinks, such as coffee, chocolate, and tea. Now he's got chocolate in there. Coffee, chocolate, and tea, and it's such as, it's a list, but it's not an exclusive list. Particularly the last, which was tea. Yeah, once again, don't get in the way of this guy in tea, in which the inhabitants of this country indulge more than in any other beverage. There was a lot of tea drinking, I guess, back then. And finally, he says, tea taken hot and in immoderate quantities, I guess that means a lot of it, not only has a tendency to weaken the organs of digestion, but causes fluctuations and congestions in the humors of the face, and frequently brings on a degree of debilitating perspiration.
So you get the substances of the word of wisdom being mentioned, at least in this document, and we'll show others here as well. Please.
I just want to mention something that struck me here, because he's talking about, and other people will talk about, the weaknesses that end up occurring because people are taking these substances. And I wondered if that informs my understanding of what it was talking about here, where it says, hang on a second here. Where was the introduction? Was it over here? Yeah. Given for a principle with promise adapted to the capacity of the weak. Now, and the weakest of all saints who are or can be called saints. Because of that last clause, I always thought this was talking about faith. But I don't know. I think maybe in the context of what's going on around Joseph Smith, maybe the weakness is a physical weakness that is seen as occurring to people because they are drinking tea as well as the other things that are forbidden by the word of wisdom. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just say my first hunch would have been what you said, which is maybe it was for those who had the weakest of faith. My next guess would have been those who were the weakest in terms of being most prone to addiction. But based on other things that are said during this time, it seems like what Joseph's indicating is what you just pointed out, that those who have perhaps the weakest bodily constitution.
Possibly. And so, it's going to help you out. You're not going to be so weak. You're going to be strong. You're going to walk and what is it? Run and not be weary and walk and not faint. Sorry,
Yeah.
there it was. Okay. That's the next slide, I think.
And so this is the temperance movement is going on at this time too. So the American Temperance Society was formed in 1826. Within a few years, about 1,000 local organizations sprang up across the nation.
Okay, can you hang on a second there, Bill, before you go on?
Mhm.
Because when I read that, I just went, holy crap. I mean, there's not even 50 states at the time, but 1,000 local organizations, temperance movements springing up across the nation within a few years of 1826. That's like everywhere.
Yeah. And it's clear that the time that Joseph Smith is giving this revelation, there is a ton of groups of people all over who are frowning upon alcohol. And I say again, it started in 1826, but you see the pamphlet on the left is labeled 1835, American Temperance Almanac. And so you still get this this moment running strong way past when the revelation was given. And then we get to this really cool article. We all know Lester Bush from talking about Mormonism in the Negro. Of course, that's his words, not mine, and that's the way the church framed it. But he also had a really influential dialogue article on the word of wisdom in early 19th century perspective. We're not going to read this here, but I will try to remember to link it in the show notes if folks do want to read that. But I will note that Lester Bush in dialogue covered the 19th century health ideas ecosystem of Joseph Smith. He showed that early 19th century Americans were swimming in arguments about alcohol, tobacco, tea, coffee, meat, digestion, stimulants. What's funny by the way?
What's funny is that what Joseph Smith continues to do, even after he's done with the Book of Mormon, is resolve all the disputes of his day. That's what Alexander Campbell said about the Book of Mormon. And indeed, modern historians who know the Book of Mormon very well can see that throughout the Book of Mormon, and so can I. It is there to resolve the disputes of the day, up to and including infant baptism, as well as many other things. And it comes down with a certain answer with God's imprimatur. So this is the way it is. But the Book of Mormon doesn't get to resolving the temperance movement, that dispute. So now here comes, maybe that's why he didn't just tell the guys, knock it off, because Emma doesn't like it. We're going to have God weigh in and resolve this dispute as well.
And going hand in hand with that is, if you were to say, what is Joseph Smith's greatest gift as one who's outside the church, who knows the history well, I think we would both say, and you can answer differently if you want, but what I would say is that Joseph Smith was an incredible recycler of ideas that were already in his milieu, and this is another instance.
Yes, and the only difference between you and Terrell Givens is that you think that makes him not a prophet.
Yeah, right. It's whereas he would call it a bricolage of revelation. Yes.
That's what makes him a prophet in his mind, the fact that he's stealing ideas from everybody else.
Yeah, right. And in a way, that's sort of what Blake Ostler's doing with the expansion theory too. So gives Joseph Smith permission to go ahead and add in whatever he thinks should be added into Nephi and Lehi and Mormon and Moroni's story. All right, so it continues on here. It says 19th century Americans were swimming in arguments about alcohol, tobacco, tea, coffee, meat, digestion, and stimulants long before Latter-day Saints treated the word of wisdom as a temple gatekeeper. Bush summarizes how some mainstream medical authors at the time warned about very hot liquids as physically harmful, specifically mentioning soup, tea, and coffee taken at high temperature. Hot drinks wasn't a weird phrase in 1833. It fit real medical talk people were already hearing. He also, please.
This is the thing, okay, that hot drinks, okay, it never says coffee or tea in the word of wisdom. If God wants to say coffee or tea, I think God knows how to say coffee and tea, but he doesn't. He says hot drinks, which can include hot coffee, it can include hot tea, and it can include anything else you're drinking that's hot, including soup or chocolate, which was mentioned in another periodical. It's not what it contains that is the focus of the prohibition. It is the temperature.
It is. And Mormon leaders, because over time, the terms of the day change, Mormon leaders seem to have lost the context of that and have gone off in their own direction about what that means. And it starts as early with Hiram Smith, although I think what Hiram's doing could be seen as at least connected to this idea of temperature. So it says here, he also shows that opposition to tobacco didn't start with Mormonism. A popular anti-tobacco impulse grew around 1830, and doctors debated tobacco risk while also acknowledging its long history as a medicine for everything, such as reflected in D&C, again, it says here 89, line about tobacco as an herb for bruises in cattle. Now, I'm not really sure. I didn't look into this, whether tobacco really is an effective thing to help bruises.
It may be like a steak on a black eye. Maybe people in the live chat know some thing about how tobacco can be used for bruises to make them heal faster.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Maybe like a poultice.
Yeah. Do you want to read this about Sylvester Graham? He's the inventor of the graham cracker.
Yeah, this was fascinating to me. Graham crackers. Sylvester Graham pushed a diet centered on whole grains, warned strongly against meat, alcohol, tobacco, and overstimulating substances, wouldn't want to be stimulated, and believed that spicy foods, coffee, and tea stirred up unhealthy desires. Graham, as well as other extreme reformers, broadened temperance into a war on stimulants more generally, including coffee and tea, and that Grahamism got tied to fears about sexuality and masturbation in that era. So he creates the graham cracker.
Yeah. And notice this. Go ahead and read that section too. I thought this was hilarious.
He was walking down the street one day and somebody called him a cracker. So he said, "Hey, I got an idea. I'm going to take all my thoughts about whole grains and put them into a cracker, and I'm going to call it a graham cracker." Graham crackers were invented to stop sexual urges and desires because the inventor, he's a reverend, Sylvester Graham, believed that eating meat and fat led to sexual excess. He thought meat and fat increased lust and was extremely anti-refined white flour, instead favoring unsifted wheat flour.
Have you ever had
graham crackers are processed today, though?
Oh, I'm sure they are. I'm just trying to imagine, I've got sexual urges, but if I just eat some graham crackers, I can sort of set that down,
Either eating graham crackers or listening to the Book of Mormon be read to you at night. Remember that story that recently came out? The lady was posting about how glad she was that her husband was listening to the Book of Mormon because it made going to bed so much less eventful.
I'll tell you, graham crackers, I like them. They're pretty good. I don't think they're that good. So, but this was interesting. Sylvester Graham is in this temperance movement, also dealing with sexuality, and often saw these substances as contributing to an unhealthy sexual nature. So, including leading to masturbation. So that's such a strange thing. So his
you know what they say about too much meat.
I don't.
Okay. And masturbation. I'll let your imagination do the rest.
I'm just trying to picture a world where people walked around thinking the graham cracker would keep you from touching yourself. All right, there's that. Looking at the early 1800s, the word of wisdom doesn't show up in a vacuum. It lands right in the middle of broader health reform movement that was already in the air. The Quakers, for example, were big on simplicity, self-control, and avoiding excess. Many discouraged alcohol, tobacco, and again, stimulants. And they understood that. They understood that the hot drinks of coffee and tea had something to them that gave you a burst of energy, but also were, in their belief, something not healthy, not because of detailed health science, but because these things were seen as morally degrading and spiritually dulling. So the Quakers came up with a lot of health code themselves that it had some overlap with the word of wisdom. And then the medical worldview of the time, which is honestly wild by modern standards, had doctors believing that disease came from overstimulation of the body. So anything that excited the system, such as alcohol, coffee, tea, I don't know how meat makes it into this, spices, was seen as risky. The solution: reduce stimulation, eat simple foods, calm the body down. Yeah. Yeah. And then Lester Bush's research showed that many medical writers in Joseph Smith's lifetime really did warn about liquids taken at a very high temperature. And as you point out, RFM, that's clearly what is meant by hot drinks.
You're cooking yourself from the inside out if you drink it too hot.
Yeah. Yeah. If it burns your mouth, maybe you shouldn't be swallowing it. Including tea and coffee as physically injurious. So when the Revelation says hot drinks, it was a world where hot beverage worries were already a thing. And I will note here, Hiram Smith does in 1842 define hot drinks as tea and coffee. Will you read this thing on the right? This is the Times and Seasons article. This Hiram Smith is the author of this. I'm trying to see if I can see the date. I think it's 1842. Let me look here. June 1st, 1842. So just before a couple years before the martyrdom, several years after the word of wisdom's given, but Hiram Smith is the author of this article.
I want to ask you this question. I will read it here in a second. When else do we ever look to Hiram Smith for clarification on anything in Mormonism?
Anything, not a thing.
He is a shadow behind Joseph Smith, maybe pulling his strings if we go with Randy Bell's theory in Dartmouth and Moore's charity school. But he never says anything that's significant. But here he writes an article and it gets quoted because it says hot drinks means coffee and tea. We had a very instructive, impressive, and salutary discourse delivered us in the city of Nauvoo last Sabbath on the above subject, the above subject being the word of wisdom, to a large and attentive congregation by President Hiram Smith. And again, so we've got an edit there. I think it goes down. And again, hot drinks are not for the body. So this is from what Hiram said, or belly. There are many who wonder what this can mean, whether it refers to tea or coffee or not. I say, by the way, it does refer to tea and coffee. He doesn't say exclusively, does he, though?
He doesn't.
And somebody has put a note there, looks like a little cross mark, perhaps with a pencil, a number 2, Ticonderoga. Why is it that we are frequently so dull and languid? You see, he's seeing these manifestations, this torpor that we have, and it's caused because of eating and drinking the wrong thing, and we need to stop it so we won't be dull and languid. It is because we break the word of wisdom. Disease preys upon our system, our understandings are darkened, and we do not comprehend the things of God. The devil takes advantage of us, and we fall into temptation, all because you're having a little coffee in the morning.
And I think it is a big deal. Again, he doesn't say it's exclusively tea and coffee. This could still be understood as a temperature issue, and that coffee and tea hot are included in that. Because there's not a lot of context given, it's not like we can use this and say, this is exactly what is meant. This is exactly how this is defined. He says it does refer to tea and coffee, but not necessarily exclusively.
I am noticing a difference in how I used to be, which was, it says hot drink. So where can I get an authoritative statement to define what that is? And that's what it means, right? Versus now where I want to find out what it means, and I go to the original document and I read it carefully and I try and understand what it's saying in the context of what's going on at the time. So I can try and understand what the original author, either God or Joseph Smith, meant by what it was that they wrote down, as opposed to what later people have interpreted it to mean.
Yeah. And Hiram doesn't say that God defined it as tea and coffee. Hiram says that I say it does refer to tea and coffee. And Hiram doesn't speak for the church. And as you point out, we don't have any other instance where Hiram Smith is speaking with the authority to speak on behalf of God for the entire church. So this could easily be just used to say that he's sharing his opinion. And also to what you're saying is that we, when we're in the church, we want all the answers to the questions. So you're looking for where God defines hot drinks, and you utilize this Hiram Smith statement, when in reality, what the most educated, wise, best critical thinking person is going to do is go back into section 89, read the word of wisdom, see the word hot drinks, and then figure out what hot drinks means in the context of 1833.
The reason Hiram Smith is so important here is because we definitely do not want hot drinks to include hot chocolate.
No, we don't. Yeah, and we don't want it to include caffeine either, because we're going to keep drinking our 2 liters of Mountain Dew.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So I wanted to show a couple slides here of both how the Joseph Smith Papers Project and apologists today approach this, and I'll call it plagiarism, because again, I think we can show conclusively that Joseph isn't giving any new idea around the word of wisdom. Rather, he is pulling things that are already have medical opinions on the record in the 1830s, and he's simply putting that under the voice of God. So, will you read this one? This is the Joseph Smith Papers, and they're talking about the word of wisdom.
So, the Joseph Smith Papers Project. Okay. At the time this revelation was dictated, so their notes from the historians of the church. At the time this revelation was dictated, the temperance movement, as well as other dietary reform movements, was beginning to factor more prominently in American culture. Initially fueled by concerns about the physiological effects of alcohol, calls for more moderate or temperate use of alcohol. So that's what temperance is all about, right? And even for complete abstinence had become increasingly identified with Christian reform movements by the time, or this time, and had resulted in the formation of thousands of temperance societies throughout the United States. Okay, so the church historians are recognizing this situation that's going on in 1833 at the time that Joseph Smith gets the word of wisdom. In Kirtland, Ohio, the Kirtland Temperance Society. The Kirtland had its own temperance society right there, whose founding constitution boasted 239 signatories. Wow, that's a lot of members. Held its first annual meeting on October 6, 1830. So that's 3 years earlier. Shortly before Mormon missionaries arrived in the area from New York, 3 years before the word of wisdom. The society continued for 5 years, during which time a distillery at Kirtland and 2 in Mentor, Ohio, evidently closed for want of patronage. According to one reminiscent account, the society disbanded after many of the temperance workers moved away as the Mormon population in the area grew, suggesting that Mormon involvement with the society was limited. Oh, okay. But certainly exposed to it. Arguments against the use of alcohol and other items, including tea, coffee, and tobacco, could be found in the religious, medical, and popular publications of the time, while arguments promoting the health value of other foods and drinks were also prevalent in the period's literature. So basically what they're saying is that the word of wisdom is very obviously a product of its time and place. In January and February 1833, Joseph Smith himself was subscribing to the American Revivalist and Rochester Observer, which I think is one publication. So Joseph Smith is a subscriber to an evangelical weekly publication that regularly published articles on temperance. Oh my gosh. Talk about a smoking gun.
This is so interesting, right? Like the Joseph Smith Papers Project is going, hey, the critics are right. Joseph Smith is swimming in this. He's subscribing to temperance periodicals. There's a temperance movement in Kirtland before Joseph Smith gets there. And there are plenty of medical advice in his milieu talking about prohibition of tea, coffee, and tobacco as well. The revelation of the word of wisdom isn't unique. And the church itself in its history department is admitting as much.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't make tobacco good for you just because there were temperance movements going on at the time. Unfortunately, everything in the word of wisdom doesn't match up with science even today, like you already talked about with the tea and the coffee.
Yeah. But again, Joseph Smith Papers Project is giving you the facts, and I think they're doing a pretty good job of it. As a believer, this would have surprised me to have read this. I will note, though, don't let the facts get in the way of a good apologetic argument. So I'll turn now to the Word of Wisdom. This is an article on the church's website. This was written by Jed Woodruff, and the modern LDS Church acknowledges the question of whether Joseph Smith borrowed ideas of his day to influence the Word of Wisdom, but dismisses such, stating that while similar ideas existed, they weren't articulated exactly the same. So it can't be. Now, I want to read this. Latter-day Saints who learn of the American health reform movements of the 1820s and 1830s may wonder how these movements relate to the Word of Wisdom. Did Joseph Smith simply draw upon ideas already existing in his environment and put them forward as revelation? Rather than any chance of a yes to that, here's what it says. Such concerns are unwarranted.
Unwarranted. That could never have happened. Not in a million years did Joseph Smith draw upon the ideas in his environment that we know were there.
And then listen to his argument. Remember that many early Latter-day Saints who took part in temperance societies viewed the Word of Wisdom as inspired counsel, adapted to the capacity of the weak and the weakest of saints, who are and can be called saints.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
What is the point of that argument? I don't understand. Does it have any persuasive force that many of the early Latter-day Saints who were members of temperance societies viewed the Word of Wisdom as inspired? How does that help?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an analogy. It would be like, there are flat earthers who believe the earth is flat in spite of the fact that during this time and day that there are many scientists who believe that the earth is round. It's a strange argument to make that a small group of people believe something to be revelation, and that must mean that if the same argument is found outside of that group that has the exact same facts, that somehow they couldn't connect the dots, so we shouldn't connect them either.
And putting a fine point on it, wouldn't we expect a group of people who are already members of temperance societies to be more likely to view the Word of Wisdom as inspired counsel?
Yes, if you already go, alcohol's bad and hot drinks are bad, and look, God said so too, and that's revelation. Yeah, that's the game that gets played.
I don't think that's a good argument. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's not. He continues. Moreover, the revelation has no exact analog in the literature of its day. Temperance reformers often tried to frighten their hearers by linking alcohol consumption with a host of horrific diseases or social ills. Meanwhile, the Word of Wisdom offered no such rationale. Strong drink, the revelation says simply is not good. Similarly, spare explanations are given for the injunctions against tobacco and hot drinks. The revelation can be understood more as an arbiter and less as a participant in the cultural debate.
That's amazing, because nothing says exactly the same words or exactly the same position, I guess, on all of these different things as the Word of Wisdom. The thing that's remarkable is in that last line, he actually admits that what Alexander Campbell said about the Book of Mormon is correct, and what I said about the Doctrine and Covenants, section 89, is correct. Joseph Smith is once again weighing in on contemporary issues of debate and getting God's word to answer it. And that's what he says here in this last sentence. He says, the revelation can be understood. I think it should be understood more as an arbiter. In other words, this is a decider of what is true, and less as a participant in the cultural debate. Yeah, Joseph Smith is having God say, this is the right way.
And just because the science of the day is stating specific ailments, and Joseph Smith has God just saying, well, I'm not going to go that far. It's just not good for you. Doesn't mean that the latter isn't borrowing from the former. And I'll note, we've said this so many times about so many other issues. Again, does a good plagiarizer copy in full or ensure that there are slight differences so that it can't exactly be pinned on him for plagiarizing?
And remember that the series of crappy arguments come right after the statement, such concerns are unwarranted. I don't think he's established that such concerns are unwarranted, the concerns that Joseph Smith was borrowing from the temperance movement of his day.
In Mormonism, when I first joined the church and I learned all the things that were taught as revelation, I thought so much of what Joseph said was unveiling of new things. And then one after the other is me learning that in each instance, Joseph Smith is recycling something that was already around. Adam Clark's commentary, inserting the words of Paul as if they're the words of Moroni. It happens over and over and over again. Even in his own revelations, he uses the symbol from the book of Abraham to pretend he's creating a translation in part for the Kinderhook plates. So he recycles everything, including his own stuff.
Yes, and there's something here. Dang it, I'll find it here. Okay, it reminds me of Goethe's Faust, which I actually read at one point, but it has Satan. What is the name of Satan in there? I can't remember. Mephistopheles, Mephisto, something like that. He says, men usually believe, if only they hear words, that there must also be some sort of meaning. This is an insight into human nature, which I am using here on this because what our hero Jed Woodruff says is such concerns are unwarranted, and then he says a lot of words which do not support what he has just said there. But men think, what do they think? Men usually believe, if only they hear words, that there must also be some sort of meaning. Well, often that's not the case, but it's something that can be taken advantage of, like I think Jed Woodruff is doing here.
And Dan Vogel notes, by the way, remember that Jed Woodruff helped Bushman research and write his book.
No, I could not remember that because I didn't know it. No, I did not know that, Dan. Thank you for letting us know that.
As you point out, Woodruff says such claims are unwarranted, and then he tells you that there's enough overlap in the advice of the day and the word of wisdom that such is warranted.
Yeah.
One only decides it's unwarranted when one needs to distance Joseph from plagiarizing ideas of his day.
It has to be from God, so it can't be influenced by the society in which it is being formulated.
Yeah.
Or I think he wouldn't say it that strongly. I'm sorry. He would say Joseph Smith isn't borrowing directly. Now, of course, Terrell Givens would be fine with that.
Yeah, but Thomas Wayman, I think, uses the phrase direct borrowing exactly when him and Haley Lamont are reporting that Joseph Smith obviously took a lot of material from Adam Clark's commentary.
Do you ever have any contact with Haley anymore? Because I know that you were the one who broke that interview.
I have not spoken to her since probably 6 months after that was released, that episode.
Well, I know she's moved on from the church, but it'd be nice to find out how she's doing and everything.
Yeah, well, I can certainly reach out to her. I think I've got her as a Facebook friend, so I'll try to do that and report back. All right, so next up here, not by commandment. And I think this gets interesting. So if you remember at the beginning of this episode, what's funny now, RFM?
Nothing. It's just that God says it's not a freaking commandment. But then later on, it's going to become a freaking commandment. So which God are we following?
Yeah, if you'll remember, we talked about, this is that moment where we talked about the heading, which is separate from the revelation. It's in italices, and it appears to just be a heading, and the down below is the revelation. But such is not the case. Like I said, this is the opposite of the 1830 years after the coming of our Lord, Would you read the part on the left here, and this will explain what's going on?
Okay. The word of wisdom started as soft counsel. Over decades, it became a boundary marker for full participation, in other words, a commandment. The Joseph Smith paper shows that the opening statement, not by commandment or constraint to a principle with promise, appears in the earliest manuscript copies as part of the revelation. So that part is not part of an introduction that somebody came up with. It's part of the revelation from God. And is this an example of it here on the right of that?
Yes. So on the left is the oldest copy we have of it. Again, it's got in pencil, looks like section 89, but this is the oldest documentation of this word of wisdom being written down. This is in the Joseph Smith Papers Project. My understanding is that this is contemporary to approximately 1833 when the revelation was received. You'll notice that the heading isn't something added later, rather it is original to the document. The Joseph Smith Papers Project says as much. So while in the bottom right, you see what it would have looked like in the scriptures, in the original, that top paragraph, which looks like a heading, and then the first verse of this section, it was all the same revelation. So you see there at the top, a word of wisdom for the benefit of the saints in the last days. Yeah. So this is all part of the revelation. And so there isn't a way to make the not by commandment, because you can see it there, the third line, to the saints. I'm not again, greeting, comma, not by commandment or constraint, but by revelation, the word of, okay, so it goes on and on. We would have come in, again, church leaders have come in later and indicated that now's the time it becomes a commandment. And we'll go through that process here in the upcoming slides. And it's much. That's okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead, please, because I was actually reading that second paragraph, and I'll wait till I get done with that, or we get done with that to make that comment.
It's much easier to take the not by commandment, if it's just a heading, and put your own spin on it, call it revelation or not, and say, now this thing is a commandment. But when not by commandment is part of the Lord speaking to Joseph Smith, and all of it is a revelation, to change such would require a revelation as well. And as we get into this, I think it's pretty easy to see that the leaders of the church are adapting the word of wisdom as they see fit, not because Jesus Christ shows up in the room.
Yeah, the comment I was going to make was, even if it's not part of the revelation itself, although that does make it especially sticky, like you mentioned, to change it later if it's God speaking. I mean, who else would be speaking there other than Joseph Smith, God's own prophet? By the voice of my servants, or by mine own voice, it is the same. So you still have, I think, the same problem, though it is starker if it's God speaking.
Yep. So there's that. So did we read that bottom piece? But in the 18th, I think you read that, right?
I don't think so, but I think you just said it. You synopsized it. In 1835 Doctrine and Covenants, that opening paragraph was printed as an italicized heading, and that formatting made it easier for later readers to treat not by commandment as an editor's intro rather than God's words.
Yeah. Okay, so then we get to this, which is an article, Did the Word of Wisdom Become a Commandment in 1851? I believe this is dialogue as well. Robert J. McHugh is the author. And he adds another interesting layer. He argues that early publication editing choices created long-term confusion about whether not by commandment language was an intro or a revelation text. And he notes that the introduction ended up being treated as part of the canon when the D&C was revised and sustained later. So he's just adding more context that says they were debating this at some point, And even when that happened, there was some sort of sustaining that the introductory language was actually part of the revelation. So you have that as well. And then I'll just note here, the word of wisdom was preached, but lived with very little consistency. And we all of us on this side of things that pay attention to Mormon history have gathered that. We know that by the Nauvoo period, a more tolerant moderation rather than abstinence approach was common. Historians note sources claiming pioneers carried tea, coffee, alcohol west when they could. The Joseph Smith Papers, their historical notes confirm that the saints debated how strictly to treat it, partly because of the not by commandment or constraint language. And they document examples of people treating tea or alcohol as acceptable medicinally in that area, and not just medicinally either. We'll see those examples later. We won't read that here, but I will note on the Joseph Smith Papers Project website, in the historical notes for the Word of Wisdom revelation, they give you all of this context about how the saints had these substances with them. I will read up just read one little part. Where was it here? Let's see here. It says church members from Kirtland in the spring of 1838, for example, the 70s drew up a constitution charging leaders to see that the word of wisdom was heeded. That is, that no tobacco, tea, coffee, snuff, nor ardent spirits of any kind were taken internally. Hiram Smith, however, speaking a few days later, advised those leaving Kirtland not to be particular in regard to the word of wisdom, though subsequent events suggest his counsel was largely ignored. So I thought that was interesting.
It is, and I'll tell you what happened to me, and it's probably what happened to you. It's probably what happened to a lot of people, is that the church teaches its members that what it teaches today, it has always taught, because God never changes, and the doctrine never changes. It's always the same. And therefore, since today the word of wisdom is a commandment and is a requirement that you commit to follow to be baptized, and that you have to follow it to go to the temple, it's a commandment. So if you start studying church history, you may come across a time or two where early Mormon luminaries are breaking the word of wisdom all over the place. And you go, what is going on? They're breaking the commandment. No, they're not, because it wasn't a commandment then. That's the one thing. The church would apparently rather have you believe that Joseph Smith and others broke the word of wisdom than they are to have you understand that this has gone through an evolutionary process from not being a commandment to becoming a commandment.
It's a strange thing, right? Like if God gave a revelation and then 50 times over the next 150 years, there's some little adaptation, some little twist. The brethren have to address this substance or that substance. They give reasons, then retract the reasons. And you would think if you had your ears to the mouth of God, you would be able to easily figure out what it is that's right and wrong and draw a clear line that doesn't need adaptation.
It's very mysterious. And it's kind of like they're trying to figure it out in a fog, and there's a smoke-filled room and it's all dark, and they're trying to figure out what God wants them to do.
Yeah. And so now we'll lay out some of the moments, and I think most of this is chronological, but the moments where the church is speaking up about the word of wisdom in a way that is unique to any of the moments that came before it. And so will you take this first one? This is September 9th, 1851. And this is President Brigham Young.
Okay, so on September 9th, 1851, some 18 years after it was given, the word of wisdom, the patriarch to the church, John Smith, delivered a talk in general conference on the word of wisdom. During his address, President Brigham Young arose right in the middle of his talk, and proposed that all saints formally covenant to abstain from tea, coffee, tobacco, whiskey, and all things mentioned in the word of wisdom. Now, that's from the minutes of the General Conference in the Millennial Star, published February 1st, 1852, page 35. The motion was accepted because, if Brigham Young's going to mention anything, I guess everybody raises their hand. unanimously and became binding as a commandment for all church members thereafter.
And they say it that way, but did it become binding, right? Did it?
Well, I guess Brigham Young thought it should be binding on all the saints other than himself.
Yeah. And we don't necessarily need to read this. We can, but just for the sake of time, we won't. But it is there. If you want to pause your screen, you'll see that the patriarch, John Smith, does get up and speak, give his conference talk. And you'll see there in the bottom right clipping, President Young then stood up and said some things about the word of wisdom and then made it essentially a commandment. And then I'll note here in February 1851, so again, in September of 1851, so this actually happened after, this came before, in February 1851, newly appointed Utah Territorial Governor Brigham Young approved an ordinance of the local General Assembly stipulating that only the governor could issue licenses to manufacture ardent spirits. And Brigham Young, by the way, maybe many believers won't know this, but Brigham Young actually does become a millionaire in Utah, mostly due to his management or mismanagement, however you would see it, of church funds. It's not like he's just privately investing in places. He's using church money to build his own personal wealth, but he builds his own distillery, and he's the one who controls the licenses for alcohol. I think that's a strange mix of business for the governor of the state.
It could lead to a conflict of interest, though I do have to say that, in modern terms, having the state issue licenses to people, probably to manufacture as well as sell ardent spirits, is something that we're accustomed to. It's only that the people who are, making those decisions and issuing those licenses probably don't have a side business doing the same thing.
Correct. So there's that. And then I'll just note here too, one official church history topic page says that after the decline of polygamy, post 1890, the word of wisdom observance became a new marker of Latter-day Saint distinctiveness. That's church-produced language and honestly a powerful lens for how religious boundary markers work. What I'm trying to say here is that when polygamy was the way in which we distinguished us versus them, we're the Mormons, we do polygamy, and they are the ones who fight against polygamy out there in the world. When polygamy goes away, Mormon leadership needs something to make the people of the church distinctive from the rest of the world. When you are I want to use the word fanatical, but that's too strong. But when you are a religious group that's trying to separate itself from the world, you need special distinguishing doctrines, distinguishing markers. And when polygamy went by the wayside, church leadership saw the word of wisdom as a great go-to to distinguish the non-members from the members, to make us look at ourselves and go, we're different than the world. We're unique. We're a peculiar people.
We will have frequent times in interacting with the world where our uniqueness has to get brought up. You're at a party, they're serving alcohol. You got to say, no, thanks for me. I'm a Mormon, or coffee or tea. I even heard it once suggested, and this has been some time ago, that is the real reason that God instituted the word of wisdom, and later it became a commandment. Wasn't because of anything that it had in it specifically, but that it had things in it, and that they served as boundary and cultural markers, and that was important enough to God. I think that's a very creative solution that isn't suggested anywhere in anything except in the mind of the person who came up with that idea. But there you have it.
Love that. Will you tackle this one? This is an article by Thomas Alexander that was also a dialogue article, I believe.
So he wrote an article called The Word of Wisdom from Principle to Requirement. Aha. Thomas Alexander describes a May 5th, 1898 meeting of the First Presidency and the 12th, where leaders debated how hard to apply the whole thing. You get this fascinating moment where Lorenzo Snow pushes to carry it out to the letter, including the meat part. And Wilford Woodruff says he sees it as a commandment, but doesn't want bishops withholding temple recommends over strict noncompliance. That's not how most of us imagine 1890s leadership talking about temple worthiness.
It's a debate. And you and I know this. We spent enough time in the history to know that Jesus never shows up in the room and tells these men, this is what it is. It's almost always these debates that go on in the first presidency or in the Quorum of the 12, where they're trying to figure out, with all the leaders sharing their opinions and perspectives, everybody takes different stances, and whatever the strongest opinion is in the room, either by higher authority or by number of people, that one wins out and the other ones lose. And then they walk out keeping the apostolic charge and deliver it to us as if it's a unified revelation from God. Any thoughts there?
It's like at the same time period when the leaders of the church, the top 15, are meeting and having conversations and discussions and debates about blacks in the priesthood and the temple. They're not going to God to get revelation on the subject. They're talking about who remembers what Joseph Smith said about this, and can that lead us in some way to come to the correct answer. So it's always about trying to figure out what somebody else said, an earlier authority, not going to the authority of all authorities in prayer for revelation.
In fact, it's pretty telling, right? Like, if on one hand you claim your prophets, seers, and revelators, and you have access to God and him straightening things out and telling you the way, and yet you treat your meetings as though your expectation is that God will never show up, that it is up to you as a group to debate it out and to figure out what to do there without God ever stepping into the room. They're not looking to the window or the door for some spiritual being to show up. They're looking to each other to try to hammer this out and debate it out and argue it out and come to some decision that way.
In that context, how perhaps unintentionally insulting it must have been when Kate Kelly asked the top leadership to pray to God and ask if the time had come for women to receive the priesthood. Doubly insulting. First off, there's the whole women in the priesthood thing. And the second thing is suggesting that we pray and ask God when they don't do that at all.
Yeah. And then I'll also note, as we go through this one and a few other slides, I would have loved to have found the original document that the author in these various articles is pointing to. So for instance, in this one, Thomas Alexander is describing a meeting of the First Presidency and the 12 on May 5th, 1898. I would have loved to have been able to find that. I go into the footnotes. I show the footnotes there. I go into the footnotes. I'm trying my best to find documents. I think I'm pretty good at finding these things. I couldn't. And so there's about 3 instances where I'll put up what I do have, but unfortunately I don't have the original journal, First Presidency minutes, early document that shows such. I have to trust that Thomas Alexander and others in the upcoming slides have those sources and saw them, whereas I do not have access to them. All right, in this one here, renewed efforts by church presidents John Taylor, Wilford Woodruff, and Lorenzo Snow moved the Latter-day Saints toward total abstinence from harmful substances. By 1900, evidence suggests that most church leaders were living the word of wisdom. A landmark event came in 1902 when President Joseph F. Smith instructed stake presidents to refuse temple recommends to flagrant violators of the word of wisdom. For the first time, violation of the word of wisdom led to restrictions in church privileges. Now, it's not if anybody's breaking the word of wisdom, it's if they are flagrantly breaking the word of wisdom, then they have their temple recommend withheld from them. And again, this is one of those instances. This is Thomas Alexander. There are the footnotes. There's the part of the article that mentions such. But I went into like the approvement era and got that document. I don't show it there. So it must be the Lund Journal or this First Presidency to C.R. Hakes, August 1st, 1902, or another First Presidency letter to John W. Hess, but I could not locate any of those. Perhaps Dan Vogel might have those in his early Mormon documents, so perhaps he'll say something about these as he is in the chat tonight.
Any later Mormon documents?
What's that?
Maybe his book, Later Mormon
Yeah,
Doctrine.
maybe
These aren't
that.
exactly early.
Well,
I do
you
want to amend something I said earlier when I talked about the leadership of the church saying they don't ask God, okay, in prayer. I don't know that. They may ask in their prayer circle when they are in their temple robes and everything, and they do that, I believe, during maybe at the beginning of each meeting that they have. So they probably ask for his guidance and everything, but there's nothing that I've ever seen historically or read that would indicate that they actually receive any kind of visionary experience or anything that happens where everybody recognizes that this has happened and this is a communication from God. And so this is what we're going to do. In fact, everything I've seen, including the testimony of President Eyring, suggests exactly the opposite.
Correct. And you can see that just from the parts we've gone into so far, and there's a few more coming. It is obvious from these little shifts and adaptations in the word of wisdom, it is not revelation. It's solely coming by members of the 12 and the first presidency having conversations and the strongest opinions or the majority opinions winning out.
And one might ask, who is Joseph F. Smith to tell God that the word of wisdom is a commandment and you can't get into the temple, even if you're a flagrant violator of it, when God himself is the one who said, it's just some good advice.
Correct. Yeah. Who does one think they are? Bruce R. McConkie again to Eugene England and how illogical that was. And yet he saw it as his place to put Eugene England into his. Will you tackle this one? This one was a lot of fun. I was able to find, at least in part, some of this.
This is from Messages of the First Presidency, okay? This was a big deal. It was a series of books. It was compiled by James R. Clark. First Presidency Messages used to have the force of Scripture in the church for many, many decades. And when I joined the church, that was still the understanding that First Presidency Messages were the mind and the will of God. They were as good as Scripture. And so I think that's what motivated this fellow, James Clark, to go and compile all these different First Presidency Messages, and you could get them and have extra books in your standard works. So a First Presidency letter dated October 8th, obviously that's changed now. It went from, I think, what the president says is what God says. That was Joseph Smith, okay? Brigham Young tried it, didn't work out so well. So then it went to the First Presidency. Whatever the First Presidency says, that's what it is. And now they're trying to say it's whatever the First Presidency and the 12 say, and they all have to say it with a united voice. And then it's going to be doctrine until science proves it's wrong. And then we were all just speaking as men. But here we go. Presidents of Missions. I'm sorry, a First Presidency letter dated October 8th, 1919, that told mission presidents, so this is right around when President Joseph F. Smith passed away, I think, that told mission presidents that recommend should be given only when it's known applicants keep the word of wisdom. Okay, so mission presidents out in the mission field where there are no organized stakes of Zion, the First Presidency tells those mission presidents that they should give temple recommends only when people keep the word of wisdom, along with tithing and other standards, right? Okay. So they don't even have to be a flagrant violator if they're in the mission field, but if they're in the stakes, they have to be a flagrant violator for it to keep them out of the temple at this point in time.
Yeah, and I'll just note here, even just the book itself, presidents of missions are not authorized to give temple recommends. These are issued by the president of the church for mission members. So by the way, again, smaller church, much more of the day-to-day business is consolidated at the top. But as the church got bigger, that would be dispersed to people so that mission presidents would hold temple recommend interviews and stake presidents and bishops would hold temple recommend interviews.
Yeah, and I think Joseph F. Smith had actually passed away the previous year in 1918. So his successor was now the president.
And it just says down there below, letters of recommendation should be given only to those who have been members of the church at least a year and in good standing for 1 year prior to giving the recommend. It must be known that they keep the word of wisdom, pay their tithing, and are otherwise good members. And it goes on there, but I'll just note that. And then this was kind of cool too, I thought. This trend continued under Heber J. Grant. President Grant was a fierce advocate of prohibition and a strict interpreter of the word of wisdom. So strangely, coincidentally, when he becomes the leader of the church in 1921, observance of the word of wisdom became a requirement for admission to the temple. If I can do it, so can all of they. And President,
whatever happens to be important to God's prophets is also important to God.
Yeah, President Grant clearly taught the revelation as a commandment, not as a guideline or suggestion. By the way, this is interesting. George F. Richards' journal, March 26, 1921. This is where this source is listed as. I can get a picture of the journal, and it's like there's like 17 of these, what you see on the screen there. Only the first 2 have been published to the public. The rest of them have not yet, at least. And so I was not able to read this. I was only able to get a picture of what this looks like. So this is the volume of George F. Richards' journal that it comes from, but I have no idea the contents of it, and I have to trust that what is being noted here is the case. The church isn't hiding anything from us, though. Why not just publish everything? Just publish it. Just put it out there, but they don't.
Imagine how worried they are that there's going to be something compromising in this stuff, and how many committees have to look it over in order to try and make sure that there's nothing like that in there. And if there is, we've got to, we got to take it out before we publish it. How are those journals? I'm sorry, the journals from who's the guy in Nauvoo and the Gap Journal and all that stuff? How are those journals coming with publication?
Oh, you talking about William Clayton?
Yes, thank you. The William Clayton journals.
Those
They've
are
been promised to us for years and freaking years now.
Any day now, we will see those. I feel like they'll be so heavily redacted, we'll all look at it and chuckle because it'll be it'll be almost the whole page redacted on lots and lots of pages of the William Clayton Journal. By the way, just a note about this whole hiding things and journals. Was it Newell Knight where the first few pages were missing, and you suggested that it might be a First Vision account that none of us know about?
Yes.
And at the time we did that episode where we talked about that, you could go online and read that. Since you did that episode, that link is now broken. And now the only way I know to get access to that is because Tim Rathbone has it. So I have a copy of it because he had a copy of that document, essentially an article that had it verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't get it online anymore, even though you and I had access to it when we did that episode on that Newell K. Knight account. I don't think that account is any longer. Joseph Knight Sr., Dan Vogel saying. So Joseph Knight Sr., I don't think that account is online anymore. And the link that you and I used for that episode is absolutely broken at this point. I sometimes wonder if the SCMC does a little more than just keep records. They also help the church go like, hey, we don't want people finding that later. So not only are things hidden and not brought out, some things that were public are no longer out there.
Well, we've all said things that we wish we could take back after thinking about it, haven't we? The difference with the church is it can.
It can. That's right. So there's that document. And then this one here is just to note some of those major moments. Again, we've gone over most of these, but 1902, 1906, leadership started substituting water for wine. 1915, Joseph F. Smith said that young or middle-aged men should not be ordained or recommended to the temple unless they abstain from tobacco or intoxicating drinks. The old people had long habits, so they allowed them to get away with still doing it. 1921, again, Thomas Alexander says the church made adherence requirement, adherence to the word of wisdom a requirement for admission to the temple. It goes on, but that's just some of the timeline stuff.
So 1851, it becomes a commandment. In 1921, it's a commandment.
Yeah, 1851, it becomes a commandment. 1921, it really becomes a commandment. Yes. Okay. This was, I think, at least funny, a little entertaining, but it's LDS leaders who are violating the word of wisdom. And the first one here is Joseph Smith. And it just notes that he drank a glass of beer at Moser's.
Moser's,
yeah.
where everybody knows your name.
Where everybody knows your name. Dun, dun, dun. So this was December 1842 to June 1844. This date, March, book 4, 1st of March to 22nd of June, 1844. And so here you have it, Joseph Smith, long after the revelation, not following it himself.
I read this. It must have been December of 1893. It probably was. It was actually 1983. 1983. So I'm a couple years back from my mission. I read this and I'm just going, what on earth is going on? Why is Joseph Smith drinking beer at Moses or any other place? It must be before the word of wisdom was given. So I checked the dates. The word of wisdom was given 1833. This is 11 years later. Joseph Smith is the one who received the word of wisdom. He's got to know what's in it, right? Right, Joseph? Well, he did. I was the one who didn't, and beer is fine with the word of wisdom.
Yep. Yep. Once you understand mild drinks of barley are just fine, Joseph Smith was just fine. But there are other stories. I didn't include this one, but I remember hearing a story of Joseph Smith like riding around town on his horse, smoking a pipe or a cigarette, and just trying to sort of dare the people to criticize him for doing such. Don't know if there's any merit to that, but it was at least a secondhand story in church history. We have another instance of Joseph Smith doing such. This is 3rd of May, 1843. So this is earlier than the last one, but still long after the word of wisdom. And let's see what it says here. Called at the office, drank a glass of wine. Now, this is not mild drinks of barley, RFM. This is a glass of wine with Sister Janetta Richards. By the way, I'm thinking Janetta Richards is one of his plural wives. I could be wrong about that. I want to look this up really quick.
I don't know them all by heart, but it's an unfamiliar name. But then again, who's to say we know them all?
Yeah, Janetta Richards, polygamy. Willard Richards engaged in his first polygamous marriage on January 18th, 1843. He married Sarah Longstroth and Nancy Longstroth. I guess this would have been Willard Rich. Yeah, she was the wife of Willard Richards. So this was not a plural wife of Smith, but some reason he's alone with her and drinking a glass of wine with her. I think that's interesting.
Yes, but the important thing is that it was of her mother's make. Her mother made it in England, so it was okay. Nobody got to it in order to poison it. Am I reading this correctly? Is he actually drinking wine in the morning?
Yeah, the first half of the day. Yes.
Yeah, because he's doing something else different from 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock p.m. He held court. So this is before 11 o'clock in the morning. Boy, Joseph Smith gets started early with Janetta.
He is with this sister alone in the morning drinking wine. Huh.
Okay.
Sort of strange.
Well,
all right.
For me to judge God's prophet.
Who am I? All right. We'll move on from this. We get Willard Richards. This is my favorite one.
Yeah.
He wasn't. Well, this is also another thing of Joseph Smith. Sorry. This is Joseph Smith at Carthage jail.
Mm-hmm.
He sends out, he has the guard. They give the guard money, $2.50. The guard said that one was not enough and the guard said $1 was enough and would take no more. Guard immediately sent for a bottle of wine, a pipe, and 2 small papers of tobacco. And one brought them in soon after the jailer went out. Doctor topped the bottle, presented a glass to them. Joseph he crosses off them. It's just Joseph who gets a glass.
Oh no, they're going to pass it around, but Joseph gets the start.
He tasted, Brother Taylor tasted, and Doctor tasted, gave the bottle to the guard, who turned to go out when at the stairs top, someone below called him 2 or 3 times. He went down, a little rustling.
And you know what the little rustling is, right?
Yeah, the Carthage moment's about to begin, but at least he had a stiff drink before then.
Well, right. And a sea stick. It looks like they were having a party trying to break every one of the elements of the word of wisdom before the mob got him.
And they take their garments off, right? They cast their garments aside, drinking a glass of wine, smoking off the pipe.
It's no wonder John Taylor whacked Joseph Smith. He was furious. Oh, no, wait. He took some wine too. Oh.
Yeah. So there's that. This one here is my favorite. June 9th, 1897. I was quite restless all night. This is Wilford Woodruff. Felt chilly. Took a little brandy sling and a cup of coffee and slept some before daylight until 9 a.m. when I ate breakfast, after which I rested and slept at intervals. He breaks the word of wisdom twice in one occasion by having both coffee and a brandy sling so that he feels better.
Yeah, well, if he's chilly in Utah in June, he's got to be sick.
Yeah, but does one, when they're sick and need divine help getting healed, does one then break the word of wisdom and drink alcohol and coffee?
Well, like it says in the Epistle of James, if you're feeling bad or ill, don't call for the elders of the church. Call for the brandy sling and the cup of coffee.
And I love, he knows this drink mixture. It's a brandy sling. And I'd have to ask the internet what that mixture is. Somebody out there in the chat, please let us know. What is it?
I want to get a brandy sling. Maybe we should have a brandy sling on Mormonism After Dark or something.
We should do that. Yeah.
The brandy sling.
Have a tall glass, a brandy sling, and a cup of coffee.
Oh, there's a cocktail recipe. A sling drink. By the way, it's a kind of drink. A sling is a drink historically made with sugar, hot or cold water, hopefully not the hot water, nutmeg, and a spirit such as gin, whiskey, rum, or brandy. So a brandy sling is that. Sugar, hot water, could be cold water. I'll bet it was hot. Nutmeg. I'm sorry.
And the brandy.
The brandy is the most important part.
It is.
Through the sling.
Otherwise, you're just drinking hot sugar water. All right, so there's that. LDS leaders clarifying the word of wisdom. So these are these moments later on where something comes up and they need to address something. We actually go back to Brigham Young to get the first one. But please, what are your thoughts?
Just God knows that God has a speech impediment. He has trouble getting his message across on his own. So he needs his lackeys, his minions, to interpret and clarify it once given.
Yeah, and there's constant clarification. So this first one is Brigham Young. Will you read the underlined in red sections there at the bottom? You'll see this is an April 7th, 1867 talk reported by David Evans, but this section is on the left. So if anybody doubts that this is actually there, you can pause this. If you want to copy that and zoom in, you'll see that exact same language in that top left small piece. But if you'll read those red underlined sections.
He says, now there is no harm in a teapot, even if it is in space orbiting the sun. There is no harm in a teapot, even if it contains tea. If it is let alone, leave those teapots alone. And I say of a truth that where a person is diseased, say for instance with canker, there is no better medicine than green tea. Okay, so for medicinal purposes. You want me to go down to the next red thing?
Yep.
If a person is weary, worn out, cast down, fainting, or dying, a brandy sling. Oh, yeah. A little wine or a cup of tea is good to revive them. Do not throw these things away and say they must never be used. Here's Brigham Young being a little bit nuanced, right, Bill?
Yes, and I also just want to say, notice that he's telling you the rule that there's nuance and allowance, and notice what future leaders do. They just keep extending theology further and further and further, trying to enunciate upon every jot and tittle.
Yeah, they do. And this is 67 that Brigham Young is saying this, and this was 97, 30 years later, that Wilford Woodruff is doing exactly as prescribed by Brigham Young, having a little brandy sling when he's feeling under the weather. Cup of tea is good to revive them. Do not throw these things away. They can be used with judgment, prudence, and discretion. Ask our bishops if they drink tea every day, and in most cases, they will tell you they do, if they can get it.
Again, Brigham Young says, do not throw these things away and say they must never be used. And what do future leaders do? they say throw these away. They must never be used.
Yes. That's a good point. That's a good point. I think that's a head-to-head problem with prophets.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness living prophets trump dead prophets.
They have to, because they contradict on so many things.
Yeah. That's the whole reason why we go with living prophets over dead prophets.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have to.
Yeah. This is a famous one. And I think this one's interesting because this one addresses caffeine. So this is a first presidency letter, November 22nd, 1965. The first presidency of the LDS Church clarified that the drinking of Sanka coffee, which is decaffeinated coffee.
Do you remember Sanka?
Yes. My grandmother had instant coffee. It was just a fine grain, black or dark brown, and she would just mix it with hot water and could drink it that way. Which is decaffeinated is not a violation of the word of wisdom. So decaffeinated coffee is in this first presidency letter is not a violation of the word of wisdom. This decision was made by secretary to the first presidency, Joseph L. Anderson. And I'll just note, when the first presidency secretary addresses something, he isn't just going like, hey, forget the first presidency. It's going to be my job to tell you something. No, he is speaking on behalf of the first presidency because he's been asked to do the legwork of writing out the letter and sending it on. Now, in this case, this one here has...
Let me just ask you, who is it signed by?
Yes. And
all 5 members of the first presidency.
And I want to slow down only because I don't want to be confusing. I'm pretty sure this is all accurate, but we also have another letter in the next slide. And I don't want these two confused because they say two very different things. But this decision was made by Secretary of the First Presidency, Joseph L. Anderson, who stated that the caffeine in coffee was what made it unacceptable, while Sanka coffee had caffeine and I don't know what that word is, but deleterious drugs. Those drugs were removed. This ruling marked a significant change in the church's stance on caffeine, allowing members to enjoy decaffeinated beverages without facing penalties for their consumption. And I'm just going to read that bottom paragraph. Actually, we should just read the whole thing. So I'm going to read this. Dear Bishop Miles, and Bishop Miles was in the Hollywood ward, Los Angeles stake. So right there with the actors and actresses in Hollywood, he was right in the thick of that.
Asking about Sanka.
Yeah. Dear Bishop Miles, enclosed, please find a photostatic copy of a letter from Neil C. Wood, who signs his letter as first counselor in the Elders Quorum, Hollywood Ward, in which letter Brother Wood makes inquiry regarding the use of Sanka coffee and specifically inquires as to whether the drinking of Sanka coffee would be justification for denying a person a recommend to the temple. We note from the letter that you, as bishop of the ward, were called into the Elders Quorum meeting when this question was discussed. So they're discussing it in priesthood. Somebody says, go fetch the bishop. We got to get an answer on this. And to think that the lay leader bishop has any ability to decide. You were called into the Elders Quorum meeting when this question was discussed. We feel that it would be preferable to write you in regards to this matter, whether to communicate with Brother Wood direct. Now, here's the main paragraph.
Once again, they're going to the writing to the bishop instead of to the Elders Quorum president who wrote the letter in the first place.
Right. Go through the proper channels of the priesthood. So here's the paragraph. For your information, please be advised that the drinking of a beverage made from the coffee bean, from which the caffeine and deleterious drugs have been removed, is not a violation of the word of wisdom. And the drinking of Sanka is not a justifiable reason for denying a temple recommend to one who is otherwise worthy. We shall be pleased to have you convey this information to the presidency of the Elders Quorum. They seem to be saying, RFM, that it is the caffeine that makes coffee a violation of the word of wisdom. Now, they'll change this in the next letter. But at least for this moment in time, the first presidency says coffee's not the problem. Caffeine's the problem.
I think for it to be codified here in this letter, it's obviously been something that's been germinating for a long time before 1965, but this is jumping the shark. Here's where the church jumps the shark. It takes a revelation from God. First off, it's not even a commandment. They've already made it a commandment in 1921. All right. You can't get to the temple. You can't join the church unless you are following the word of wisdom. So it's a commandment now. Now they're taking something, a commandment, right, that doesn't say anything about caffeine. Doesn't even say anything about coffee or tea. It says hot drinks. You should not have hot drinks. And because now it's a different world than the one in which this came forth, and you're not having the same discussion about hot drinks and why they're bad for you, I think the leaders of the church are casting about in their benighted and unrevelatory way to figure out why the heck God is so down on coffee and tea. And it's not because they're hot, it's because of the substances inside of them. This is a man-made philosophy. This is the philosophies of men mingled with scripture. So therefore, it's the caffeine that's in them that's the problem, not whether they're hot or cold. Notice that.
Jay Castro, who is just catching up, is going, so soup is a hot drink, huh?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite hot drinks.
I'll
just wait for a while for it to cool down like I did last night before I can have any.
Yeah. I'll just note, in the research, it said something about Joseph L. Anderson, secretary to the first presidency. But now as I'm just sitting with the letter, you're right. It doesn't have his name anywhere on this. It is clearly signed by David O. McKay, Hugh B. Brown, N. Eldon Tanner, Joseph Fielding Smith, and then I don't know who the last guy is, Thorpe. B. Dissom, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know who that guy is. I don't know who that guy is, so I'd love to know who that is. But I don't want to attribute this to the first presidency secretary. This seems clearly under the direction of the first presidency itself with their signatures on the letter. This is my point, that there's just no doubt that at any given minute, this is all up to private interpretation of whoever the church leaders are at the time, based on the debates and arguments they have among the 15 in their meetings. And it changes all the time. You'll see that in the very next letter here. So
I would add that what they end up saying now is that the commandment is that you cannot drink any hot drinks, even if they're cold.
Yeah, you can't drink hot drinks even if they're cold. Correct. It is no longer about temperature, at least at this moment, November 22nd, 1965. It is about the caffeine and the other deleterious drugs that are in it.
Was that always a problem with you when you were trying to talk about this to non-members? Because caffeine and coffee are easy, but what the hell's going on with the tea? Why is that so bad? And I sort of remember we talked about, was it tannin, T-A-N-I-N, or some kind of drug that was in tea tannin that we told people was bad for them. And so that's why, we're always trying to come up with reasons to justify these crazy commandments from God.
Yeah. And part of it is because the leaders aren't consistent, right? Like, is it coffee? Well, according to this letter, no. Is it caffeine? Well, not according to the modern church, because we'll get to it later, but it's BYU and soda pop, right? So
it has been reversed.
It's not caffeine either. Is it hot drinks, like temperature? Well, it's not that either. Like
hot chocolate.
So, and cold coffee still prohibited. So
iced tea.
Yep. So there is no rhyme or reason. Even the brethren from generation to generation can't agree with each other. It's inconsistent. So the inconsistency alone implores the rational thinker to recognize that God's simply not involved.
I think the church is doing a really good job of teaching us how it is that Christianity fell into apostasy within the first 200 years.
Yeah. This is the ongoing restoration, by the way, in real time as we're watching this chronology of the word of wisdom.
200 years ago, 1800 years ago. That's what they called the apostasy as well. They called it the ongoing restoration.
Yes. And we look back and go, oh, Jesus established the church, and then in 400 AD, there's the Nicene Council. They declare this, and then this happens, and that's removed, and this takes place, and you don't need that much time. From 1830 to today, it only takes that much time for everything to change, and that's in a age of verifiable history, well-documented instances, journals, and first presidency records, and periodicals sent out among the church. Even in a moment of that good of record keeping, it only takes this long for everything to go haywire and sideways. And you don't need all the time that the early Christian church was given. Anyway, so there's that. Okay, here's this next letter, which is entirely different than the one we just read. Again, the first one we just read was November 22nd, 1965. This is only 5 years later. And this is Joseph Fielding Smith, signed by, remember, his signature was on the first letter.
Mhm.
So he was present for when coffee's fine, but caffeine in coffee is bad. And then we get this one. Do you want to read this letter? And then if you want to start maybe by reading the thing on the right and then read the letter itself.
Okay, the thing on the right says, in 1970, once again, the first presidency walks that back, the 1965 statement, and states there has never been any interpretation given other than hot drinks means tea and coffee, and the saints should stay away from items that contain habit-forming drugs. So the letter says to President William, once again, these all come in response to people asking questions. It's sort of like from the very beginning with Emma Smith, right? She's asking questions and telling Joseph why it is she doesn't like what's going on, and can we get some action on this? It appears that that's the only time that these come out is when somebody's asking a question. So they're going to write back to President Nickel. Is it Nichols? Is that an S at the end? I think it might be.
Yep, with an S on the end.
From the California East Mission. So apparently he's a mission president in Arcadia. Your letter of March 16th addressed to Elder Richard L. Evans, in which you inquire regarding the church's policy concerning Sanka coffee. Yeah, we talked about this 5 years ago. And the drinking of Coca-Cola that should be capitalized, both C's. Coca-Cola has been referred to our office. The Word of Wisdom, section 89 of the Doctrine and Covenants, remains as to terms and specifications as found in that section. There has been no official interpretation of that word of wisdom except that which was given by the brethren in the early days of the church, when it was declared that hot drinks means tea and coffee. Well, and 5 years ago when you did that other interpretation. With reference to the beverages you mention, the church has never officially taken any attitude on this matter. Hope he's not talking about Sanka. But the leaders of the church have advised and do now specifically advise against the use of any drink containing harmful habit-forming drugs under circumstances that would result in the acquiring of the habit. Any beverage that contains ingredients harmful to the body should be avoided. Sanka coffee has not been included in beverages containing harmful ingredients. Okay, so Sanka's still in the clear. Praying that the Lord will continue to bless you in your labors. We are. So now they've changed everything to simply anything that you would take into your body. Drinking, it specifically was talking about beverages here. We would presume the same thing would occur with eating. Anything that you eat or take into your body that's harmful for your body, you shouldn't do. Well, as Hamlet said, there needs no, excuse me, it wasn't Hamlet, I think it was Horatio. There needs no ghost, my lord, come from the grave to tell us this. It was spoken to Hamlet. Why do we need God to tell us don't eat things that are bad for you?
Yeah, just don't eat things that are bad for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a strange thing. So you have Joseph Fielding Smith, who was there on the signature of the first letter. Here we get this second one, and it's similar, but at this point, they don't want to really address caffeine specifically. But as you point out, it looks like Sanka is still approved. Sanka coffee has not been included in beverages containing harmful ingredients. So they see Sanka as okay. So it's not coffee. It's something in the coffee that's not in Sanka.
I would say that this letter, I think, represents a broadening of the prohibition.
Yeah. Okay. The next one here, this is April 2008. Doctrine and Covenants 89.9 says we shouldn't drink hot drinks. The only official interpretation of this term is the statement made by early church leaders that it means tea and coffee. Caffeine is not specifically mentioned as the reason not to drink these drinks. It was in 1965, but it's not in 2008.
So this is April 2008. This is from the newsroom, the LDS, the church newsroom?
Correct. And then they have a little addition here. So Mormonism in the News, getting it right. Actually, these are two different articles. I'm sorry. The top one on the right is an article titled, "Is there anything wrong with drinking sodas with caffeine in them?" And it goes on as Caffeine Against the Word of Wisdom, April 2008. And they in that moment, they say caffeine is not specifically mentioned as the reason not to drink these drinks. So the church is saying, if you drink caffeine, we're not going to get involved. If you drink coffee or tea, that's a problem. In 1965, they said caffeine's the problem. It's not necessarily coffee or tea.
And they reiterated it in 1970. But now they're changing in 2008. And then in 2012, what did they say there?
They've got the Mormonism in the News, getting it right. This is the newsroom staff.
Getting it right. Absolutely.
Finally, another small correction. Despite what was reported, the church revelation spelling out health practices, D&C 89, does not mention the use of caffeine. The church's health guidelines prohibit alcoholic drinks, smoking or chewing of tobacco in hot drinks taught by church leaders. By the way, it's not taught by church leaders. It's taught by Hiram Smith, speaking personally, and every leader after points back to Hiram Smith as where that comes from. So it's really not appropriate to say church leaders. It's really Hiram Smith who has interpreted such, and every other leader after him has pointed back to his statement. But again, same thing. Modern moment, coffee bad, caffeine okay. 1965, caffeine bad, coffee okay.
Can I use this just as an illustration? This is what Mormons really think about their prophets. This is how much esteem they hold them in, which is really zero. Because even though President and Prophet David O. McKay in 1965 signs off saying it's the caffeine that makes it bad and don't drink anything with caffeine in it. And then in 1970, the President and Prophet Joseph Fielding Smith, of all people, echoes the same thing and says that is the doctrine. And now some anonymous newsroom staff hack is saying, oh, well, the caffeine really isn't important. It's okay to drink caffeine. That's what they're indicating now. It's just coffee and tea. That's the only thing you can't drink. But Coca-Cola is going to be hunky-dory. And in fact, we're going to do something special about that in the near future from the time this was written.
I want to know what root beer Thomas Monson had in his root beer floats, because some root beers have caffeine and some don't. My hunch is that in any of these given moments, in 1965, my guess is that somebody in church leadership was drinking Sanka. And my guess is in the modern moment, somebody in the church leadership drinks caffeine. And so you need to be able to keep your thing allowable.
You mentioning root beer brings back memories of me actually looking at cans and the ingredients and double checking to make sure there was no caffeine in what it was I was drinking. And I got to the point, I could spot it right off. It always appears pretty much in the same place in the list, right, of the ingredients. So always check it out. Make sure there's no caffeine in what you're drinking. You wouldn't want to be breaking the commandment of the word of wisdom.
Yeah, I think mug root beer is safe. I think mug is the one that's always caffeine free. I think most of the others have it, unless they specifically say otherwise, as if it's like sort of a special edition of that root beer.
Can I
Then,
ask people in the live chat if any of them ever did that? Did they check the ingredients on things to make sure that they weren't breaking the word of wisdom like I did? I told you I was a good Mormon.
I'm from Sandusky, Ohio. In Sandusky, Ohio, we have the oldest Ohio dairy farm, longest running, Toft's Dairy, TOFTS. They have their own dairy farm. They have their own ice cream parlor. And when I had joined the church, I was 6 months into the church, and one of the elders, Elder Kyler, one of my favorites, and me, Elder Kyler, and Elder Russell, we go to Toft's ice cream parlor, and he walks up to the stand and he goes, "I'll have the coffee ice cream." And I'm new to the church, and here's a missionary, and he's drinking coffee ice cream. And I said, Elder, whoa, what are you doing? That's coffee ice cream. You better find out if that has real coffee in it. And he goes, "I'm not going to ask. If I ask, then I'll be responsible." So he got the coffee ice cream, and I remember another instance where we had an event at church, and I don't think I was bishop yet. I think I was in the bishopric, but somebody brought coffee ice cream, and you should have seen everybody running around trying to figure out if that was going to be okay or not, because some new convert or investigator had brought the coffee ice cream, and I think the decision was made that it shouldn't be used and it should be sent back home with them. So
there is a story about David O. McKay that may have bearing here, and I hope it's not apocryphal. I hope it really happened. But he's in the movie theater, and I think when he went to the movie theater, they basically just had to rent out the whole movie theater, basically, because it's the president of the church, and everybody knows him because he's in the white suit and the white hair and everything. Anyway, the person from the concessions is helping him out, and the usher and everything, and they're really concerned because they have a contract with Coca-Cola, and the only cups they have are Coca-Cola cups. And so, have you heard this story before, Bill?
I have, yeah.
So the usher goes down and says, very apologetic, profusely, "I'm so sorry. I just want you to know that we're going to bring you a cup. It's going to say Coca-Cola on the outside, but it's because that's all we have. It's all we have." And David O. McKay laughs and says, "Well, I don't care what it says on the outside, as long as there's Coca-Cola on the inside."
Yeah. This is the games we play when God doesn't actually declare anything in the room of 15 men claiming they all talk to God. I love it. So there's that. And then we get this cool thing. This is a statement on the word of wisdom. This is 15 August 2019. The word of wisdom is a law of health for the physical and spiritual benefit of God's children. It includes instruction about what foods are good for us and those substances to avoid. Over time, church leaders have provided additional instruction on those things that are encouraged or forbidden by the word of wisdom, and have taught that substances that are destructive, habit-forming, or addictive should be avoided. In recent publications, by the way, wouldn't that mean that tea is fine? I don't think tea is destructive. I don't think tea is habit-forming or addictive. Hence, wouldn't tea then be okay with the word of wisdom by that definition? In recent publications for church members, church leaders have clarified that several substances are prohibited by the word of wisdom, including vaping and e-cigarettes.
Where do they get that from? Where do they get that from? They're making stuff up now.
Notice this too, by the way. They name green tea. Meanwhile, white tea and black tea are made from the exact same plant, but it's just a different time of year or different state of the plant in which it's harvested.
I had thought it was Heber J. Grant who said that when they talk about tea, it's China black tea that's the prohibition and green tea is fine. I mean, that's a real old quote, like from my mission I'm remembering, so that may not be correct. I'll see if I can find it.
And then again, coffee-based products. So here, Sanka would be prohibited. They also have cautioned that substances such as marijuana and opiates should be used only for medicinal purposes as prescribed by a competent physician. And then we get to this. I guess I can stop there for just a second. It really is difficult to make heads or tails of this, because at any moment the church speaks on the word of wisdom, they articulate the word of wisdom differently than they do at any other moment. I get I get that times change, that medicinal marijuana is a thing today where it wasn't in the past. It would have been included just in harmful illegal drugs, whereas today it has to be addressed because it's legal under when it's prescribed and someone has a license to purchase it. But in this statement in particular, saying green tea is really selective and I think problematic. And then again, you go back in time and Sanka's okay, but caffeine is not. In other moments, caffeine is okay and coffee is not. It's so difficult as a member of the church. You really don't know what is heads or tails, what's up or down. It's so difficult to make any sort of conclusive statement about what the interpretation of the word of wisdom is, because even the leaders of the church are changing on it all the time, constantly.
Yeah, and I want to just go ahead and update what I said. I wouldn't rely on that memory because it may just be that when I was on my mission, I encountered this saying by Heber J. Grant, and the black China tea or China black tea arrested my attention. He was just as opposed to that, I'm sure, as he was to green tea. Now, in Japan, we had mugicha, which is tea made from grain. Is it wheat? It might be wheat. I don't know, but I mean real wheat. So basically, it's cold and it tastes really bad, but it's mugicha. Oh, I'm sorry. The cha part means tea in Japanese. So the cha is tea, mugicha. Yeah. And that was, I think, okay. It wasn't something that tasted at all good, so it's not like it was a temptation. But I think that mugicha was okay. Tea made out of grain.
Yeah, what's allowed and what isn't. And then there's been discussion of is it kava? The Polynesians drink a drink. I think it's kava. And I think there's some debate about whether that's allowed or not allowed. And most of the statements I saw seem to indicate that it was not coffee or tea, and hence it was permitted, and it is used in some rituals that the Polynesians do. So that was another substance that got some discussion. And then, you mentioned this before the show started. Do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, mugicha. That was barley tea. Barley is the mugi. Okay. So you can have cracked barley for breakfast and mugicha for dinner. The Daily Universe, BYU will now sell caffeinated soda on campus. Say it isn't so. Is this breaking news? No, it's not. It's from 2017, September. So that's about 9 years ago. It'll be 9 years ago in September. So that's when, much to my astonishment, BYU, Brigham Young University, the University of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, starts selling Coca-Cola to the students, thereby saying it's okay. And now, as far as I know, what do you think the status of things is, Bill? Has everybody just sort of forgotten about that and everybody thinks it's okay to drink as a good, faithful Mormon Coca-Cola?
It's a weird thing, right? Because all through this time, the church is not punishing anybody for drinking soda pop. Again, we make these jokes about Mormons drinking 2 liters of Mountain Dew, and they can do that. You can be a temple-worthy high priest drinking Mountain Dew, breakfast, lunch, and dinner all your life. And yet, when it came to the church schools, maybe it's that sort of appearance of evil, but the church always treated Coca-Cola as a banned substance.
Yes.
Not allowed. In fact, it was to the point where my friend and former employer, Chris Bloxham, when he was at BYU, he had his own in the shadows, he had his own closet in his dorm full of caffeinated beverages, and he would sell them to people. So people would knock on his dorm door and it'd be $1 a can or something like that. And he would make money. Yeah, black market. He would make money off of selling caffeinated beverages to people at BYU. And it was just in the shadows, done secretly, but it was a way that he made a few extra spending dollars at the school.
In 1980, I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
In 1989, when I was up here in Washington from Austin studying for the bar exam, I met with the stake president. He'd been my bishop back when I joined the church, Bishop Murphy, now stake president Murphy. We had a little conversation. And I was kind of surprised to find out that throughout the stake, he had of his own accord mandated that part of the temple recommend questions include not drinking Coca-Cola or any caffeinated beverage.
Made his own little addendum to what the church required.
Yep.
And it's a weird thing because soda, at many moments in the church is clear that it's not prohibited. Someone will not have their temple recommend withheld for drinking Coca-Cola. And yet there are other moments like that 1965, even though it's not being talked about, but because caffeine's being pointed at as the problem, I would assume in that moment, if there's cola and it has caffeine, that it would be prohibited. But then this church doesn't ever allow it at its school until 2017. Again, who knows which way is up or which way is down when it comes to the word of wisdom, because it's so difficult to pin the church down on any degree of consistency.
And correct me if I'm wrong, and anybody out there in the live chat, correct me too, but I do not recall any kind of statement by the church or any official person, even at BYU, on the subject. It's just one day they weren't selling Coca-Cola at BYU, and the next day they were.
Yeah, just like that. All right, we're wrapping up. We've got 3 or 4 slides left. So I just want to note to people, there's the link in the live chat. If you want to come into the studio and ask us a question or make a comment. But the next one here is just a note here. Again, the church recently had to address various topics about the word of wisdom. This is when the main purpose here, I think, was that marijuana had become medically accessible all across the country for the most part. And so the church felt a need that it had to sort of address that head on.
And legal in many states, depending on
Yeah.
how recent this is, 2019.
Yep. And so you get mocha, latte, macchiato, etc. And they're basically saying that anything that is a coffee product is against the word of wisdom. So they tell you to be careful of anything that ends in a chino, espresso, a latte, a mocha, that they are all against the word of wisdom. Again, under this definition, it would appear that Sanka is a violation of the word of wisdom today, according to that. Again, they mentioned green tea specifically, but look at this. Green tea and black tea are both made from the leaves of the exact same tea plant. By the way, so is, I think, white tea. There's a white tea plant as well, but it's the same plant. The only difference is that the leaves in the black tea are fermented, and in green tea, they're not. They're both tea and against the word of wisdom. So we just had just a few years earlier where only green tea is against the word of wisdom, but now it's green tea and black tea, but the white tea is never even discussed. They're both against the word of wisdom. Some drinks have tea in them, but don't advertise that fact. So always check the ingredients. Also, iced tea is still tea.
See, even if it's cold.
Yeah, and then you get marijuana, and they're up against the fact that it's made recreationally legal and medically legal in lots of states. And their point is that if it's medically legal and you have a medical reason to use it with a doctor prescribing it, then so be it. But be careful, otherwise it's against the word of wisdom. So you have that. And then this was just me noting Joseph Smith saying, by proving contraries, truth is made manifest. And so I just wanted to note, again, there's so much science out there. You're right. To the believers, you're right. Science can change. Science has, to some degree, changed on these issues over time. But also prophets have changed on these issues over time. And I'll just note that the best science today says that, for instance, 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day may reduce dementia risk, but not if it's decaf. I mentioned that at the beginning of the show.
So it has to be caffeinated.
It has to be caffeinated coffee. Sanka does no good at reducing dementia, but caffeinated coffee does. Then there's top 10 health benefits of green tea. There's lots of articles out there about the health benefits of tea. Almost exclusively, science says coffee and tea, when taken in moderation, not going crazy on it, is good for you and healthy for you. And then but in spite of that, you've got the church telling us that maybe even a limited amount of coffee could be a problem.
Science I expect to change. That's the nature of the beast. But it's when prophets of God change over time that I start to get concerned.
Yeah. Yeah. Science should change. Prophets' direction and teachings and doctrine shouldn't, huh?
Nope. And I'm not talking about Noah in his day talking about building an ark and everything. This is completely different.
Yeah. What do you want to say?
That was Sister Beck. She was a Relief Society president back in 2000 and was it 17 or 7 that she gave this talk in General Conference? I'm sure everybody will remember this one.
Yeah, let me see if I can. I'm going to just minimize. Oh, I won't be able to do it that way. Let me see if I can do this a different way.
Yeah, it's up on Streeter's website at Thinker of Thoughts. And
let me try to stop that from playing.
Yeah, he has it under the heading of Mormons are serious about no coffee.
2007, April 2007 conference.
Well, this will never change.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. So I'll make this big. And do you want to set this up at all?
No, this is just what happens when you drink one little cup of coffee, every day. Then not only are you not going to go to heaven, but you're going to knock out 9 of your 10 grandkids too.
Yeah, here it is.
My next story is about a woman I'll call.
Can you hear that? It's for whatever reason. I need to mess with something because for whatever reason it is playing on my speaker and I don't want that to happen. So,
okay.
Let me see if I can adjust this.
Yeah, this one is one of the most often played moments from General Conference because it just seemed that the concerns about salvation and all the tears being shed were out of proportion to what was being described.
Yeah, here it is. This should play right now this time.
And now I can't hear it.
Do
you think those pearls are real? How about you there in the live? Those are a lot of pearls to be real, but I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of people love a good pearl necklace.
I hope they're not because I don't think they're that attractive. I don't think they're strung that well.
Let me try this a different way. See if you can hear this now.
Nope. I kind of like the pearls that don't droop down so far. They're a little bit closer to the neck. What do you think in the live chat, folks, about pearl strands, a string of pearls, which was my mother's favorite song, as it turns out, by Benny Goodman, String of Pearls. I can go on like this all night. And sometimes have, especially on Friday nights.
All right, let's try.
Is she wagging her finger at me? Don't wag your finger at me, Sister Beck.
My next story is about a woman I'll call Mary. She was the daughter of faithful pioneer parents who had sacrificed much for the gospel. She'd been married in the temple and was the mother of 10 children. She was a talented woman who taught her children how to pray, to work hard, and to love each other. She paid her tithing, and the family rode to the church together on Sunday in their wagon. Though she knew it was contrary to the word of wisdom, she developed the habit of drinking coffee and kept a coffee pot on the back of her stove. She claimed that the Lord will not keep me out of heaven for a little cup of coffee. Yeah. But because of that little cup of coffee, she could not qualify for temple recommend. And neither could those of her children who drank coffee with her. She lived to a good old age, and she did eventually qualify to re-enter and serve in the temple. But only one of her 10 children had a worthy temple marriage, and a great number of her posterity, which is now in its 5th generation, live outside of the blessings of the restored gospel she believed in and her forefathers sacrificed so much for. That repentance isn't optional. We're commanded to repent. The Savior taught that unless we repent and become as a little child, we can in no wise inherit the kingdom of God. We must not let one little cup of coffee One bad habit, one bad choice, one wrong decision derail us for a lifetime.
It's very emotive. What do you think, Bill?
Let me say, isn't it a weird thing? Coffee drinking keeps you out of the temple and hence, by her analogy, out of heaven.
Yes.
Creating dummy companies in order to hide money, lying about electroshock therapy,
Yes.
hiding and misconstruing history,
Totally.
creating whitewashed or carefully worded denials about your theology and doctrine. None of that's a problem.
God is totally down with all that stuff. Here's the thing that gets me, though. Okay, this lady is drinking coffee every day. What the heck is she doing living to a good old age? That's what I want to know. Did you notice she said that? She lived to a good old age. Apparently, God's okay with it.
Yeah. It's the way the church decides what a good person is and what a good, again, church leader pays a $4 million fine to the SEC for cheating the public and the government around funds in the billions of dollars. That's okay. Those people get to continue being in their callings, continue leading the church, continue having the Holy Ghost and discernment in the Spirit of God, and get to go to heaven. And this lady who is righteous otherwise drinks a little coffee and she doesn't make it.
And by the way, notice it's all on Mary, who I'll call Mary. It's all on Mary. It's all her fault, okay? Because what? 9 of her 10 grandkids drank some coffee. It has nothing to do about church history. It has nothing to do with the SEC scandal. It has nothing to do with the prophets cannot make up their mind for any period of time about what is or is not doctrine. It's not the priesthood. It has nothing to do with anything that the church is responsible for. It's just because Mary had a little coffee every now and again. It's her fault.
Such a strange thing. Well, that's the end of the show as far as the slides go. We do have a couple people down below. So DF,
do you have any coffee?
I don't have any coffee, but it occurs to me that the whole problem here is that, we just need a prophet to actually tell us the things the prophets are supposed to tell us. If they would just, answer the questions, which is the whole value proposition of the prophet in the first place, so we wouldn't have this problem. But I am here to offer a solution because I am not one of them namby-pamby prophets. I got 2 rocks here. I got 2 rocks to put in my hat.
You've got a Urim and a Thummim.
I got a Urim and a Thummim, one spectacle for each eye, one Nephi spectacle for each eye. And I'm looking. Hey, my rocks say, do whatever you want.
I'll bet your rocks say, do whatever you want. You've been eating too much meat. That's the problem with you, DF.
Yeah. I just recently started eating meat.
You see, it's taking effect already.
Yeah, I know. It's really
Did you not eat meat before recently?
No, I didn't because I grew up Adventist. I told you this, RFM.
I don't remember from day to day. Besides, our audience is new every time.
Most Adventists don't eat meat. It's one of those word of wisdom things where we don't have to do it, but we're not supposed to do it.
Okay, so as between your life not eating meat and your new life eating meat, which do you prefer?
I prefer steak.
It sounds like you like the new life.
I like a little steak, yeah.
Do you? What kind of steak? Do you have a preference?
They're all new to me, so I'm just like, yeah, give me one of those and one of them.
And what do you say when they ask you, how do you want it done?
I like well done. I have to work my way into medium because, I was a vegetarian for 40 years,
Absolutely. You want to start
I've just been working my way in the past 4 years, so.
You are right. By the way, medium well will be the next step up from
okay.
Just so you know.
Okay.
It's rare. Ooh.
No, I don't think I'll go that far. I don't think I'd go that far.
My dad
Just
used to always order his
just-
steaks rare. So, of course, us boys, followed suit. And he would say sometimes he wants it so rare that if you put a Band-Aid on it, it'll live.
There you go. I love it. Well, thank you very much, DF. Thanks for joining the show.
Yeah. And remember, hey, when you do have a question, call me up. I got 2 rocks, I got a hat, and I ain't gonna namby-pamby around it. I'll tell you what the rocks say. All right.
Thank you, DF. We appreciate your showing us your rocks.
All right.
It reminds me, isn't there a story from Vogel or somebody where one of the leaders asked the church history department about the seer stones and asked, how do these work?
Spencer Kimball,
Help me understand how these work.
can you turn this on for me? Where is the on-off switch? I need to power this sucker up. Was it Michael Quinn? It could have been if they took a break from necking, long enough to look at the seer stone.
The sacred kiss. Sheila, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
You're going to have to pull it together. 371 people are watching you right now.
Yeah, that's fine. I love how close to the bone our everything goes. Classic. I do have a question. Just may give you a prelude comment to begin with. I remember it was about 1980. My father was called as a patriarch to Salt Lake in the days when the church paid for you to go over and get training. Anyway, one of my fondest memories was we were taken to a place called the Chuckarama. And we didn't know where it was. And it's in Salt Lake, apparently. It's a restaurant. And it's eat as much as you want. I had never seen the Chuckarama.
The Chuckarama.
The Chuckarama.
Okay.
I had never seen so many obese members and so much meat eaten off a plate in all my life.
We are very proud of our obese members.
Yeah, but can you imagine if the church had put a ceiling on church members visiting the Chuckarama, never mind tea and coffee, and they weren't allowed to eat meat? It would have caused an uproar, I would think. Anyway, so that was one of my fondest memories because American food was completely different to Scottish fare.
In what way? Do you like Scottish food better or American, Sheila? Especially haggis.
Well, I do like haggis, I have to say. Burns supper time. It's beautiful. You have to be raised with it, but it's beautiful. It's made commercially. I know that there's offal and such in it, but the way they make it, you wouldn't know that was in there. So I'm very fortunate. I'm one of these now coffee drinkers that can drink coffee anytime, and I can drink as much as I want, and it has no deleterious effect upon me. I can drink it right before I go to bed. It's fantastic. Anyway, my question is, I'm sure I remember in a podcast, and unfortunately I can't remember which it was, if it was Mormon Stories or this podcast, where one of the reasons they put such an embargo on coffee was because of the influx of Swedish members, because the Swedes drank an enormous amount of coffee. Do you know if that is correct?
I don't know that.
I don't know either.
Right, because
I don't know either.
They drank coffee in place of water, apparently. They just drank it copiously. And I just wondered if you knew if that was correct. Because that would then make sense.
Get so long up there in Sweden.
Well, it's cold up there, so,
yes.
They would, can you imagine these people being raised on hot drinks and then all of a sudden an embargo where they're not allowed to drink a hot drink? So I just wondered if you knew.
I don't know. I could look it up, I suppose, but then I would only know what the internet knows. But maybe that's something.
Yes, because it would be another reason behind why there was such a negative aspect related to the consumption of coffee, if it was correct. I'm positive I heard it on a podcast, but my grey cells don't retain information the way they used to, and I cannot remember which one it was.
I don't know that there
Unfortunately.
would be that many Swedish saints joining the church before 1833. So that's my
Right.
only thought about it.
Yes, but you're stating also that that there was a continuous upgrading, adjustment to the understanding of why, when you should. So I don't know when the Swedes started coming in
I think
greater
the Swedish and
numbers.
Scandinavian converts, at least according to what I'm reading, were significant in the late 19th century.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. I mean, I'm probably wrong, but I just have a memory of hearing that, and I was quite surprised. Because
Yeah.
I mean, for the British saints, it would be tea.
Oh yeah, and the
mean, the
Japanese
British
too,
saints-
believe me.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, I put up a comment. I mean, the Chinese drank green tea as a digestive. They didn't drink it as a social. Well, they did, but they used many other forms of tea. You know, they used flower blossoms and who knows what else. But the green tea is part of the meal. So yeah. So
Yes.
yes. Yeah. Anyway,
Very much part of their
excellent.
culture.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, they drank it like nobody's business. Yeah.
Sheila, I want to know, what would you do if President Oaks gets up in general conference this weekend and declares haggis as against the word of wisdom? Which I think he
Oh,
should.
now there's an interesting question. Well, it's something that we only eat once a year.
And the rest of the year spent recovering?
Are you familiar with you're familiar with Robert Burns? We call him Robbie Burns. Robert Burns, the Scottish
A man's a man for
poet
that.
laureate. Yes, Scottish poet laureate of Scotland.
Yes.
Okay, so Burns suppers are in the January of every year, but what you don't, everybody concentrates on the haggis, haggis, neeps, and tatties. So haggis, potatoes, and turnip.
I was going to say,
they
can you say
forget
that on the air?
Sorry?
I said I didn't know if you could say that on the air. I was a little worried about what you said.
Haggis, neeps, and tatties.
Yeah.
Sweet to you is, but turnip in Scotland is massive. They feed it to the sheep in the winter. But what they forget to say is that with every mouthful of haggis, there's a dram goes down with it. So a lot of them don't even taste the haggis. It's the whiskey that they're drinking. So what would happen if they put an embargo on a haggis? Well, I mean, I haven't had it for so many years, but I think the whole northern part of Scotland would throw their hands up in horror that they're not allowed to eat their Scottish national fare. But to be fair, different spelling. Throughout the centuries have tried to change Scottish traditions since Edward and his Longshanks came up and tried to overthrow Scotland anyway. Edward and his proud army. So they would are you allowed to, this is not Friday, is it? So just imagine a middle finger going up. That's what the Scots would do to that. Just
Yes.
stick up their finger and say, up yours and get stuffed.
I don't care what you do
Yes.
to us. You'll not be taking our haggis away from us.
I know how you make porridge, you can. Yes. Yeah.
Are you
Exactly.
calling in or phoning in, Sheila, from Scotland?
No, I live in Melbourne in Australia now.
Oh, so even further
I've been
away.
I've been here for over 39 years now. Yeah.
So bangers and mashers.
Bangers and mash, that's an English thing.
Oh.
Tatties and mash, tatties and sausages. We have square and round sausages. They've got links.
I love some good tatties. Huh?
It's an interesting thing. I mean, I don't know a comparison to America or the northern part of the USA, Northwest. when you cross the border between Scotland and England, you are truly going into a completely different country. Traditions, language, dialect, accents, everything. It's a completely different, and we live on an island, completely different. So, you know, when I hear of the pioneers that left the north of England and went over to Salt Lake, I feel so sorry for them, because it would have been such, especially the women who went over and ended up being forced to marry men. It must have been a horrendous experience. It must have been traumatic to them, because it was such a different way of living, completely different. Anyway, didn't mean to make it serious, but yeah, anyway, I just wondered about the coffee thing. I just wasn't, because you having the encyclopedic knowledge that you have, RFM, I just wondered if you knew. Yes. Yeah. And
Well,
I have
I
to say,
think I intuited from what I did not know. From what I did know, I think I intuited the
Yes.
correct answer.
Well, you did, because, and a lot of the things that you refer to are the things that, I mean, I was born in the 60s too. So, and in Scotland, we taught to us literally with an iron rod up our back. So when you say that, you know, you didn't do this, it was thoroughly taught to us without, you had no variance of thought. You had to do that, or you didn't get anywhere else. It was very, very strongly taught. So I hate to think what the church would have done if they'd put an embargo on chocolate.
Oh yeah, they never touched chocolate. That wasn't going to happen under any administration.
No. Interesting, isn't it? And yet, look how much that causes issues with people. Too much sugar. Yep. I'm sure the diabetics of the world that's responsible for some of them. You know.
I think.
Anyway, so it's, and you know, David O. Mackay, he has great association with Scotland. In fact, actually, David O. Mackay was my stepfather's, my mother's stepfather's Sunday school teacher when he was a missionary in Glasgow. He served in the Airdrie branch, and he taught Sunday school. So my parents knew a lot. My parents were pioneers. They actually opened up the Glasgow branch. My father worked with, I can't remember what his name was. He was a millionaire, and they bought the building for the Glasgow Stake Centre, which was a big old house after the war. His stepfather kept the Airdrie branch going throughout the war. He's great pioneers in Glasgow, my parents. So they knew Paul H. Dunn, Spencer W. Kimball, Hugh B. Brown, you know, I can't remember his name now, but he was my sister's mission president.
Sheila, I want you to know this, okay? Yeah. Sheila, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so here's what I want you to know, is that David O. Mackay's
Mackay, not McKay. Mackay.
That's what I said. Yes. Mackay.
Yes.
His grandnephew was my first companion, my first missionary companion in Japan, and is now the current church historian. His first name is Kyle. It's Kyle Mackay.
Kyle Mackay. Is he a lawyer?
Yes. How did you know? How did you figure that one out?
Because all historians now in the last how many years are lawyers?
Yes.
Church historians.
That's what the church is famous for. Lawyer historians. People with no experience or expertise or training in history becoming the church historian.
Attorney-client privilege might be the most important thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, church history is a legal minefield today, which it wasn't when we were young. Yes.
Yeah. What is church history? Is a legal minefield? Is that what you said, Sheila?
Minefield. It's a legal minefield today. It wasn't years ago. So was that cousin related to the Mackay of the Church of Christ?
I'm sure I have no idea on that one.
Kyle
Mackay?
Yeah, Locke Mackay.
Oh, Locke Mackay. You know about him.
Was he? Yeah, he's the one. Yeah. Isn't he
He's
the one that wasn't it his family that found the daguerreotype of Joseph Smith?
No,
Mm.
but he was tied to that whole situation. He was
Yes.
one of the folks that was in charge of helping unveil the history and the provenance of it.
Yes. Yes, it was the Scottish saints that upheld all the rest.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sheila. Thanks for joining the show.
Thank you. Yes,
Have a
I'm
great
sorry
night.
we kind of went off on a bit of a tangent. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. We learned some things, so it was great. So thanks for the call.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye-bye. I think it's tomorrow there where Sheila is.
Yeah, it's already right. So anyway,
Almost tomorrow where we are.
Yeah, almost. Do you want to? You've got some things with a Easter special for Mormonism After Dark.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so Friday night, we're having the Easter special, General Conference special. See, it's April 3rd, 2026. We've got a little Easter bunny there with an Easter egg to let you know it's going to be Easter special. I think we want to focus on General Conference because that's what's coming up. And any General Conference stories you might have, I'll share some with you. Come on the show, hang out, and we'll talk about General Conference. That is, if you're not going to whatever that is, Take Back Salt Lake City that the crazy people over at Psych Word Radio are doing. If you're doing that, then you probably won't be available for this, but I'm guessing you won't, and you will be available for this. Now, I'm going to be doing this weekend General Conference recap. April, there's a Saturday morning session. I did the thumbnails and got them all ready to go. There's a thumbnail for the Saturday morning session. Here's the thumbnail for the Saturday afternoon session. Here's the thumbnail for the Sunday morning session. Notice there's no Saturday evening. Thank goodness there is a God. And here's the one for the Sunday afternoon session. So we'll be ready to go on all of those this weekend. I will be going live after each of those 4 sessions immediately thereafter to give you the breakdown on what on earth just happened and hopefully doing it in less time than General Conference takes and maybe more entertaining.
Those are always a big hit every year. So folks, do tune in. Radio Free Mormon, General Conference, keeping us up in the loop about all the things that are going on. Watching General Conference so you don't have to. Folks, like and subscribe and keep up to date in the content that way. And please go to mormonismlive.org. Please donate. It's how we do the work that we do. Unfortunately, again, it's the thing we have to do is to ask for donations. $5 a month, $10 a month, at a minimum would be just so great if we could get you to support us at that level. If you can do more, that's wonderful. Please do. And for those who do donate, thank you so much for supporting our work. Hope you learned something tonight. RFM, thanks for being here and thanks for all that you do. And I'm looking forward to your conference episodes this weekend.
All right. Well, at least one of us is.
There you go. Take it easy and get some self-care afterward because you're going to need it.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye.